We are less than an hour removed from the 2020 24 Hours of Le Mans, and from there we head virtually immediately to the track that hosts the Petit Le Mans, as we welcome you to the 5th edition of the BMW Sim 120 Cup for 2020. We say hello and welcome to Brazelton, Georgia, and welcome to Road Atlanta. It's Will Vincent here along with Arjuna Kankapati as we are moments away from qualifying taking place. There's a look at your track conditions. It's a warm track out there right now. 35 degrees Celsius on track, 52% humidity, 8 km/h wind speeds, and a track that measures just over 2.5 miles in length. So that is the scene where we are right now. Let's have a look at what's gone on so far in this championship, because we've had 4 races to date. Daytona, won by Team Redline, the two Maxes, Max Benecke and Max Venig. Then we went over to Sebring, and it was Coanda Sim Sports who took victory with Joshua Rogers and Mitchell de Jong. The Nürburgring, it was the German team of BS Competition who claimed victory with Von Heinrich and Alexander Voss. Then last time out at Spa, it was again the BS Competition stroke Cup of Nations car claimed victory with Sami Matti Trogan and Augustin Canapino. So each of those 4 teams have won $1,200 each. But more importantly, Arjuna, they have punched their ticket the start of December, and they are going to BMW Sim Live in Munich.
4 teams have secured their place, and just 2 more have their opportunity today. Road Atlanta, one of the most historic tracks in American racing, and just like has been the fact in the previous 4 races, Will, fuel saving going to be the name of the game here at the WeatherTech Raceway Road Atlanta, sorry.
WeatherTech Raceway Road Atlanta? That's a new one. But yeah, this is arguably going to be the most stressful race of the season. We're going to start talking about it now. And this is the first of those reasons, Arjuna, as we bring up the track guide brought to you by our partners at Rahal, Letterman at Lanigan Racing. And we start off with the danger zones around this Road Atlanta racetrack.
Yeah, and the start is always chaotic here. 2 wide down into that last corner, expecting a lot of chaos as they try and jostle for position into turns 1 and 3. Another important point on the track is turn number 5. This is where car setup is crucial. You can find tenths of a second using all of that runoff area. And then, of course, the important passing zone that is turn 10A and B. Expecting a lot of passing here. And don't forget as well, you can pass on the run down to the start-finish line as well.
Indeed so. We are going to now take a look on board a lap with that Rahal Letterman Lanigan racing car. Well, of course, they were the team that won the Indianapolis 500 this year. Interesting sidebar, by the way. 2 Japanese drivers have been involved in the winning car for the 2 Triple Crown races this year. But that's a run heading towards turn number 5. Difficult left-hander. You will abuse the curbs dramatically over there, but do expect to see fireworks throughout the race. Now we come down into turn 7A, 7B. 2 90-degree right-handers, each with their own unique profile. They are not just 2 right-handers, but you need a good run out of 7B, because coming up next is the longest straightaway of the race. And of course, early on, we're going to see a lot of teams doing a lot of fuel saving, sticking in the toe. Going to see a huge snake with the big braking zone coming into the chicane. That is going to be the passing opportunity of the race. And of course, you come up over the Suzuki Bridge and then roll it all the way down the final corner at turn number 12. Avoid that wall on the outside. That is a lap around this racetrack at Road Atlanta. It's a fast one. And of course, after this, just one more round. The 2020 BMW Sim 120 Cup season go. That will be at Interlagos. Qualifying is now underway, so let's start to show you. Play clock, we've got almost all drivers on track right now, and it is a return to the BMW 120 Cup for a certain Mr. Max Verstappen. He is one of 3 Team Redline cars in the field here today. We're going to pick them up, but before we get any further, we have got to make a little bit of a complaint. Team Redline. This is apparently a Team Redline red car. That's not red to me, Arjuna.
Yeah, maybe if you're colorblind, it would be a little bit easier. But for us, we might end up calling this the Team Redline green car on a number of occasions. Now, Redline, they do have a car locked into the finale, Will, but Christopher Dambietz, I don't believe, is one of those drivers. So he'll be looking to try and secure his spot along with Max Verstappen, who we're riding on board with right now.
Yeah, indeed. So there is Verstappen in the number 72 car as he works himself on the exit of that final corner and will now start a full timed lap. So let's just wait until he heads down towards turn number 1. We'll put that little timing graphic up for you now. Turn 1, off camber, uphill. Interesting to note, Max Verstappen's never done a quote-unquote real-life motorsports event at this track.
But the one thing, Will, is Max Verstappen is a very keen driver here in the simulator, spends a lot of time practicing with his Redline crew. Obviously, competed in the first few rounds of the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup as well. And I mean, for Max Verstappen, it can't be too hard to get up to speed at a track like this. Currently sits in 4th with that first qualifying time as he heads into turn 7, getting a little bit squirrely. That's not the best run, and he's going to actually abort this attempt.
So that is Thomas Tattler then. He's got himself first place for the time being. Brings that car on towards pit road. Kova, well, they are a team who could be incredibly fun to watch here today. That was the BSNXT car. BMC Sports BenQ coming up on your screen right now. These drivers, they've got 3 minutes. There's a couple of people who haven't yet done a qualifying time. This is one of them. Team Redline Blue, number 71 car, Gianni Vecchio. It's worth noting as well, Arjuna, that in terms of the way that you qualify for Munich, if you're in a part of a team where one driver has already qualified, the entire team is ineligible, then qualify themselves. It has to be a whole new of team drivers.
And right now, Gianni Vecchio, I believe, is going to be sharing the car with Jonas Wallmeyer, who is not locked in to that final round, so they are competing for that prize. But you bring up the Kova team, Will. It's interesting to see Kova 1, well, the Finnish sim racing team that's burst onto the scene this past summer. That's the established team, if you will. They've got a few newer drivers competing here today, not having the easiest run of qualifying, as we now take a look at one of the BS competition cars.
Yep, this is one of the cars from Brunnesud competition who haven't yet qualified, but they do a good qualifying time, 1:14.8 there for them. That puts them into 11th place for the time being. It is so close. Look at the gaps right now between the Williams Esports Chill Blast car in 3rd place all the way down to the Williams Esports Fanatic car in P number 8. Just over a 1/10 of a second between them. So it is really close inside your top 10 right now.
And just 1 second separates 36 cars right now. So we've got 51 cars here that are going to compete here today for that prize in Munich. But the gaps are close, and we talk about the fuel saving. Well, none of that is happening here right now. All of these drivers pushing to the limit.
Road Atlanta has been a part of the iRacing World Championship Grand Prix Series in years gone by. It was where Finnish driver Riku Alatalo stormed onto the scene, getting pole position in what is essentially his first ever race in that World Championship. So there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about here today. All the drivers have now pretty much qualified for this event, as we do say hello and welcome to Road Atlanta. The track itself, 2.5 miles, and you talked about one of the difficult aspects of today's broadcast, the fact that there's going to be a lot of fuel saving. In some cases, maybe having to save up to 5 laps worth of fuel to avoid it becoming a two-stopper. There's the other difficult part, and that's how small this racetrack is in comparison to others that we've been to, just over 2.5 miles. And that means that you're going to get traffic, and with traffic, well, becomes the ability for frustration.
And they're going to start seeing traffic early and often. Once they start getting into the weeds of some of the slower cars in your field, expect that traffic to be a constant in this race. And you talk about fuel saving. 44 laps is a regular fuel stint for the drivers here. Well, to get to the top of the hour to make it a one-stop, you're looking at 48 laps, Will. So at least 3 or 4 laps of fuel saving for every single one of these drivers.
You're completely right, as the qualifying counter will tick itself all the way down to 0. And with that, you're now in the position to run through your starting grid for this round 5 of the BMW Sim 120 Cup, live from Road Atlanta. And at the front of your team, it is that new Finnish team of Kova. Going to be piloted for the first hour or so by Thomas Tatala. Qualifying time, 1 minute 14.581. Alongside them on the front row of the grid will be Koana Sim Sport and the number 8 car piloted by Dane Warren, a new driver to Koana Sim Sport. He's hoping he can join fellow countryman Josh Rogers in Munich in December. The Williams Esports Chill Blast car, Lasse Back, will roll out in 3rd place. AAA Esports Black, and it'll be started off by Carlos Ginges, and he'll be on the outside of row number 2. 3rd row of the grid will be Team Redline Orange and Max Verstappen, alongside the R8G Esports car, the Roman Grosjean Esports car, piloted by Alexander Walters for the first hour. Apex Racing Team, Jamie Fluke will be bringing that car to green, the number 99 car, and the Williams Esports Fanatic car, Daniel Lafonte, starting behind the wheel of that one in 8th place. Row number 5 will be Vendel Sim Racing Yellow of Phil Deans and MSI Esports Alejandro Sanchez. And row number 6 will be the Bruno Sud competition car of Kei Kashube and the Team Rahal Letterman Lanigan racing car. Starting in that one will be Kevin Ellis Jr. Row number 7 will be Vendel Sim Racing Pink. Alongside them, the other R8G Esports car, Ebalt Kazamon, will be starting in that one. And then in P number 15, Logitech G Autos Esports, Simone Maria Marcheno. P16, Christopher Danbeach with Redline Red. P17, Astro Gaming Autos Esports. P18, AAA Esports. And then Williams Esports BenQ in 19th in Redline, rounding out your top 20. It is a stacked field here today. We've got big teams, big names, using some time off from the World Championship Series, using some time off from racing commitments around the world to try and take part in this. And as a reminder, team that wins, so long as they haven't qualified already, will be giving themselves a golden ticket to Munich. Take part in BMW Sim Live 2020, taking place on the 5th of December, live from BMW's World in Munich. And then also, of course, they'll win themselves a cool $1,200 each. Second place team will get themselves $600 for their 2 drivers. And, of course, prizes available for third place as well. But we're moments away now from this race getting itself underway. Final thoughts here before we get the green flag, Arjuna.
It's going to be a very interesting start here. It's almost like no one will want to be out front, almost jostling for third place in the pack. Maybe we'll see some drivers go brave and try and make it on a 2-stop, but I'm not expecting that strategy to work out here. They're on the back straight though, and we're about to get started, and it is Tuomas Tattila who will lead us to the green flag.
Yeah, and there is a look behind the Kova car of Tuomas Tattila. You've got to be careful on that first run through turns 1 through turn 5 at the very least. I expect there to be some form of fireworks heading in towards turn 3. It's where the track is at its absolute narrowest. Been round this track at a golf cart once. Incredibly fun to do so, getting 2 wheels onto the curb, almost 2 wheels into the air. Even more fun when you're behind a BMW M8 car. So Tuomas Tattila will be on the right-hand side of the track as they now work themselves over the Suzuki Bridge. And then on the left-hand side will be Dane Warren's Koanda Sim Sports car. Look at Warren trying to get himself to jump. He can't do so, but the green flag's out. We are racing live here from Road Atlanta.
And look at them going 3 wide into turn number 1, further back as well. There's a little bit of contact, but your leaders have managed to get through cleanly as they run up towards turn 3. Look at Dane Warren trying to fend off the challenge behind him as well.
Yeah, and that is Max Verstappen. Had an absolutely great start to this race. We're looking on board with Alexander Walters and the RHE Esports car, but Verstappen's up a couple of places early on into third place and putting pressure immediately on the Koanda Sim Sports car of Dane Warren. There are a couple of people who's had incidents at the rear of the field. I see HM Engineering have had incidents, as had the BS NXT car and the second Kova car having issues earlier on. And the Rahal Letterman Lanigan racing car, that was with Kevin Ellis Jr., they were involved in an incident down at turn number 1.
Yeah, there was a bit of a checkup as they tried to go 3 wide into turn 1, and I think one of the Williams Esports cars made contact with the Team RLL car, which is being run in conjunction with Apex. They're all the way at the back now, but as we dive through that last corner for the first racing lap, it is Kova that continues to lead. We look further back at one of the BS competition cars as well.
Yep, let's go on board, shall we, with Max Verstappen. Up a couple of places already in this race. 2 stabs of the steering wheel then in towards turn number 1 as he now works up the hill. So he got up some places early, and I was about to say, Arjuna, before the race started, I kind of forgot that that's what you were probably going to want to do. Make up the positions early, get into a rhythm, because while fuel saving is going to be key here, what you can't do is allow a battle pack ahead of you start pulling away, as Verstappen looking very close on the brakes as they come into 7.
He's looking very feisty right now. He does not want to let that Kova car get away. It looks like Tattila is trying to just set sail here, maybe not doing any fuel saving. Warren is a little bit slow right now. Verstappen's going to draft him all the way up into 10A. I think the move's going to happen.
Yep, as there is Verstappen. Actually, no, he seemed to have just rolled off the throttle a little bit then as they came down through turn 9, but now he goes down to the inside, slings one down, they make contact there, the Koanda driver onto the grass, and Dane Warren's lost 2 places there. So the Koanda versus Redline battles have been going on and intensifying over the last couple of weeks. Well, we've just had another example of that as they come into 10A, 10B, and that was just a racing incident. I'm not going to try and build a storyline there, Arjuna, at all.
It's definitely a racing incident. The one peculiar thing I would say is we did notice that he was maybe backing off a little bit earlier. Maybe there is a little bit of difference in the setup here. I talk about the setup being important in turn number 5 and handling the curbs. Looks like Verstappen might be running a little bit more wing. Went for that bold move to try and get the place, and now Warren might have a little bit of damage to that left front corner.
And of course, it is the corners of these cars that will hurt you the most around here. These BMWs, they are known to be tanks. They're known to take a big old hit here and there, but that's on the front or the rear. You hit them on the corner, That is where these cars really do start to become more unstable. And Dane Warren now down into P number 7. So we have to keep an eye out on that battle as we progress in this race. But meanwhile, whilst they were battling for P2, Thomas Tattler has built out a 2.4 second advantage already in this race. And only 4 minutes of racing are scored complete.
Yeah, the Finn is truly flying right now, and we had mentioned that maybe some of these drivers wouldn't try to do that two-stop. That time spent on pit lane at that last stop is just going to hurt them that much more, but it's really setting sail. The fastest lap right now, a 1:15.384, expecting that to come down as these laps go away.
As we're on board of Alexander Walters in the R8 sports car, and he gets himself into 3rd place now, upper place from where he started. Of course, Verstappen is also up now 3 places from where he started in this race, just behind BMW Sim Racing Yellow versus AAA Esports Black. And this is going to be interesting because on one hand, again, you want to start fuel saving right now, early if you can. But at the same time, Vendavel and AAA Esports Black are already 1.4 seconds behind those 2 cars ahead of Team Redline Orange and R8 Esports. So, if you're Vendavel, you've got that mind of, do I go for the move and just keep myself close to those leading duos, or do I fully commit to that fuel saving early? And also, Gino, we've got to talk about why fuel saving is important. We mentioned that 5 laps you might need to save over this race. The alternative, making a second pit stop, which might cost you in the region of about 30 seconds.
Yeah, even if you're just coming down for, let's say, 10 minutes of fuel, that time you spend going at 60 kilometers an hour, that pit lane speed limit just hurts you that much more. We are looking at Phil Dennis, and we talk about Max Verstappen being one of the F1 stars in this race, but Phil Dennis, will, Road to Indy competitor, and you know, he's got experience on the iRacing Sim. He won the Road to Indy virtual series that was run over the past summer, and he's got a lot of experience now competing for Vendaval. He's a very smart driver. Let's see what happens. Looking back at the pack, though, it's getting a little bit more spread out. Still a lot of these battle packs, though.
They are indeed. As we go back on board of that Vendaval Sim Racing yellow car, I do see, by the way, a car turned around, and that's Martin Piatella, number 81 car. So Piatella, that's not often he has incidents in races, but he's been involved in one. Replay coming up for you now, and this looks to be with one of the Williams Esports car. And yet that dreaded net code there between drivers. Nothing that either of them could have done at all. Martin Piatella off into the grass, and we'll get ourselves another look at that one. But certainly no fault at all there on the part of the Williams Esports car.
Well, unfortunately, Will, this is not the first contact between these teams in this race. The other VRS car being driven, I believe, by Mac Backham had an incident down into the chicane, and unfortunately for VRS right now, the highest running car is Dane Warren up in 6th place, and he's dropped 4 positions since the start.
He has, but it's also worth noting that he's gained a position, Dane Warren, over the BS competition car, the Bruno Sud competition car, behind the wheel. Got to be worth noting, of course, that 2 of these cars, the BS competition cars, have already qualified for Munich. The Leon Heinrich Alexander Voss car, who won at the Nürburgring. And then you had the BS Cup of Nations car, of course, the event that they partnered with Williams and, of course, ourselves here at RaceSpot to put together a couple of months ago. Sammy Matty Trogan and Augustin Canapino are already qualified for Munich. This is where that team inter-rivalry starts kicking in, because you're Kei Kashiba, you know you're highly capable in one of the most recognised GT races over the last 5 years or so on iRacing. But you want to punch your ticket. You don't want to be sat there on the sidelines watching your other people battle it out in December.
No, absolutely not. And we'll see what he can do from 7th place on the grid. We mentioned it last time at Spa, though, Will. These BS competition cars, one of the most distinctive looking cars in the entire field, and they've really established themselves. They've signed a few more drivers in the recent weeks. Rainer Talva is one of them, who is also competing here today further back in your field, but let's see what this car further up can do.
Yeah, the DAZN livery on the side of that car. I finally learned how to say that sponsor's name. I know they're absolutely huge in Germany and parts of Europe, branching out into America, even slowly coming towards the United Kingdom. We talk about huge course, Team Redline, they've had some great moments in sim racing. They've had some great moments this year in sim racing. Max Verstappen's had some great moments in this year's World Championship. Maybe not in the last couple of rounds of the championship. I don't think he would like to talk to me about that one. But interesting to note, over the last couple of laps, Verstappen has been losing time to Thomas Tattler. There is a look at the gaps. He lost basically an average or a third of a second a lap over the last three.
Yeah, Thomas Tattler I don't think is doing any fuel saving, Will. He's just decided to go for it now. But the other thing is, when you have this clean air around you, you have the possibility to try and save fuel without losing time. Now, I think back to my race here at the Petit Le Mans in the same BMW M8 GTE last year, but we were saving 2 laps of fuel consistently without losing any time. So I'm wondering if the Finn has something up his sleeve. Look how twitchy, though, those M8s are going through turn number 5.
And a big part of that, you mentioned downforce earlier on. When you come to a track like this with long straightaways, the way you can save fuel is by setting that car up to be a little bit lower on the downforce, because basic dynamics, of course, the less difficult it is for the air to go over the car, the more efficient it is going to be going in a straight line. Simply put, and this is why I only teach urban planning and not things like thermodynamics and stuff like that, because that was the worst lecture I've ever delivered. But RHG, what Alexander Walters, you're right, when you talk about the twitchiness of cars, some of them setting their cars up to be very, very low in terms of that rear spoiler, and just hoping that car, especially in the dirty air, is going to have enough grip to get through sector 1 in particular.
Yeah, and this is one of the more important corners. You head up into turn 3. It's a blind braking zone as you try and cut all of the curb on the right-hand side. Look how much of the curb they end up using, and I talked about this at the start of the race. Turn 3 and turn 5 are places where your suspension setup, Will, can often find you tenths of a second, if not more.
Yeah, and actually in many ways you can help counteract the need relying as heavily on aerodynamic grip. I'm just going to go back to flying on track. MSI Esports, Alejandro Sanchez, of course, he became the first ever Spanish driver to win a World Championship Series race in the Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup earlier on this year. He's been having a great season on iRacing. In fact, Arjun, this is probably Alejandro Sanchez's standout year in terms of sim racing, and also that for MSI Esports. They're running in P number 9 right now. They've got Astro Gaming LTC Sports just behind. They've got Team Redline red stroke green just ahead of them on track.
Yeah, and Sanchez was actually the fastest driver in practice, Will. He unfortunately messed up qualifying a little bit. He's left him a little bit of work to do. He started in 10th place, only up 1 from where he started, but there's a lot of speed in that car. And like you say, he's had some very strong performances. Currently it stands 3rd in that Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup. Still 2 races left to go. Might be fighting Joshua Rogers for 2nd place in that championship.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, of course. With all of the incidents that's been going on with Rogers and Beneke, it's almost a lot of people's forgotten the fact that there is still a championship going on over there. There's Sebastian Job, who's in the championship. Alejandro Sanchez looking maybe to try and get 2nd place in the championship. Got Williams Esports Fnatic running in 11th place. This is going to start confusing me as more and more of these Williams cars end up with Fnatic logos on the side of their car, because they are going to start looking more and more like Team Redline cars, Arjun.
Yeah, the nice thing about the Williams liveries has often been when you have the different sponsors, like the Razor car, they are in a much different color, but going to start getting a little bit confusing. I think I even called a Fnatic car Williams last time out at Spa, but one thing I just want to point out, Will, last time at Spa, we had that very, very dramatic start to the race where our pole sitter in the G-Drive Eximia car lost it before we even got to the start line. Now, there was a little bit of contact in turn number 1 that's forced a few cars into some issues, but a much cleaner start overall, I think, as we're actually seeing Jamie Fluke down onto the pit lane.
Yeah, I just saw that one as well. So, issues maybe for Jamie Fluke. I mean, unless he's going to try and change that strategy around. 15 minutes, you could build the car up, go absolutely hell for leather from now on. It's going to be worth seeing how long this pit stop is going to be, because, of course, no tyres here in these BMW 120 events. And, yeah, 10.1, he's topping off he's going to go to the back of the field, and he's thinking, I'm going to be quicker doing that strategy compared to being sat here in absolute no man's land.
Well, one thing you did notice if you were taking a close look at the right front of the car, a little bit of bodywork damage was repaired, but unfortunately for Fluke, riding on board of them right now, look at the traffic that he's managed to come back into. So it's not going to be the easiest thing for Fluke to do, and unfortunately for the Apex Racing team, now at the back of your field, and the other car they're running in conjunction with Team RLL is back in 34th place, so not the easiest race for them so far.
Can I just say, this is an absolutely gorgeous livery on the Low Grip Racing Team green car. Tom Macau, he's going to be Jamie Fluke's first victim down the road, because he's only about 7 tenths of a second ahead of Jamie Fluke right now. And of course, even more difficult for Fluke is that some of these cars are drivers who would have been inside the top 10 had it not been for them having incidents early on. For example, Martin Piatella in the number 81 car is going to be there in that mix. And also, get a little bit further, you talk about that team, Rahal Langen Letterman racing car. I will get it all out in one sentence eventually. And that number 98 car, for example, I mean, yes, the two are teammates, but when they come together on track, it in some cases might be more of a hindrance to have someone of a similar speed around you, because you won't be able to progress, start losing that mental momentum.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. We now take a look at the car. Dane Warren starting to make his way back through the field, up into 4th place now, but will the gap out front, Max Verstappen now 5 seconds behind Tuomas Tattala. That Kova car is really setting the sails loose here.
It is, as we get a quick replay there. Dane Warren, textbook pass down to the inside, turn 10A, 10B. Got it done before the braking zone. So possibly a little bit of cooperation there. Carlos Dieguez in the AAA Esports black car. And sometimes in a race like this, Arjuna, when you do need to think about fuel saving, do need to think about, you know, where you're positioning on track and how you're actually managing that first run. It is sometimes easier to just lift off the noisy pedal through turn 9 and allow the pass to be made so you don't have to go side by side through 10A and 10B and burn a little bit more fuel.
Yeah, and talking to some of these teams coming into the race, they were even talking about making that first stint maybe upwards of 50 laps so that the second stint could be a push to the metal kind of stint. I mean, we'll see what happens here, but Dane Warren, he sees those two cars in front. The gap slowly extended to the 888 car, and I think he realized he needed to close back up to those guys just to keep his chances that little bit fresher.
Yeah, indeed. So just having a look for the field. You are exactly right. There's a lot of people now just in that kind of pack of 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 cars in a row when no one's really pushing that much. I want to come back to Verstappen versus Tattala in a moment. Just having a look at my timing screen. VR competition black, and again, that's a perfect example of he could have made that move over the Speed Monkeys Esports car of Daniel Muthert there, but he just decides to back out of it into 10A and 10B because that fuel saving for some of these cars is a little bit more important. And I know there's probably going to be a couple of viewers right now watching, annoyed that, you know, this is a fuel saving race, and also be annoyed at the fact that we're just talking non-stop about fuel saving. But this is the key fundamental part of this race. We can't talk about the fact that Tuomas Tattala is 5.2 ahead of Max Verstappen right now without talking about fuel saving. But also, I know that it's a little bit different, the 24 hours of Le Mans, because they kind of regulate, especially in LMP2, basically how much fuel will go into the car for a specific run. But here, those rules don't apply.
And we're not just talking about saving 1 or 2 laps. Again, we're talking about 3 or 4 laps per stint that need to be saved. That is a lot of fuel that you're saving. And at a track like this, Will, you do have a lot of opportunities, but to maintain the lap time and still be saving fuel is very difficult. And we look off the rear of Tuomas Tattala. That gap now 5.5 seconds. Well, we look the gap between 2nd and 13th place, where Gianni Vecchio now runs the Team Redline Blue car. There's about 4 seconds separating about 10 or 11 cars there. So while the leader is really trying to check out right now, the rest of the pack definitely just considering that fuel saving.
Yeah, and there is a look at that main pack, the peloton, if we're going to call it that right now. Of course, the Tour de France is still going on as we speak, and Verstappen leads over Alexander Walters. And I just want to show you the lap gaps, the last couple of laps. At some point, we need to get the calculators out, because lap 12, lap 13, it wasn't as bad, but lap 14, Verstappen lost 4 tenths of a second. There is a third piece of this puzzle, Arjuna. We did talk about it quite a lot before we came on air, and it's the fact that this track is only 2.5 miles in length, and that means at some point you're not just going to be overtaking one car. Oh, big trouble, big trouble, big trouble, big trouble there. And that is the Coanda driver coming together with Alexander Walters, and that was down into 10A, 10B. And look at how much time all of a sudden that R8G Esports car is having to lose. He's lost himself 22 places, and he can't get going, because even though there's a kind of little access road, absolutely no way you can get going, because otherwise it would be rejoining the track unsafely. This is horrific for R8G Esports.
Not what the Romain Grosjean power team really wants to see, and unfortunately he's finally able to get back onto the track at the very end of the tail. We'll try and get a replay up on your screen in just a second, but the contact was made with Dane Warren down into that chicane, and take a look at the replay in just a few seconds.
Yep, so here we are. Let's look at this first of all on board with Dane Warren. Coming down, and Dane Warren is about 4 car lengths back, heading down into 10A, 10B. He goes to the inside. That looks as though Dane Warren actually just kind of misjudged where he wanted to be on track. I want to get another look at this one from our overhead camera, if possible, because this should make it a little bit better for us. And again, he was about 3-4 car lengths back, heading down in towards that kink at 9. And then, so Dane Warren moves to the left-hand side, almost reactionary. The same thing then from Alexander Walters. And then that Dane Warren moved to the left-hand side. He could have gone further to the left, in my opinion. But at the same time, the R8G Esports car did make a bit of a reactionary move there.
Yeah, I'm going to say this is more of a racing incident than it looked like on first inspection. I think that R8G Esports lifts off the throttle very early to save the fuel wheel. Warren looked to the inside, like you say, a reactionary move, and I think unfortunately there you could see the amount of track space still left on the right-hand side for the R8G car. If I'm being honest, I know we may be accused of some bias towards Coanda here, but definitely more of a racing incident here. You can see that late block as well. It was definitely a reactionary move from Walters there. I'm going to call that one a racing incident.
Yep, and it cost Walters a total of 42 places on track. That's what happens when you have an incident here at Road Atlanta. It is never such a thing where you can just get back going again, especially spin your car around. You have to wait almost like an entire field to go past. Interestingly, what that has done is it separated out P3 to P4, so this could give the opportunity Verstappen or Warren to just pull away a little bit. Gap is about 9 tenths of a second between Warren in that Coanda Sim Sports car, the AAA Esports black car of Carlos Diaz right now. That'll be worth keeping an eye out on, but it does look as though that the number 4 car running in P number 4, that AAA Esports black car, is just going to score that one back and get back into that full draft range by the time we get down to 10A and 10B.
Yeah, and Alexander Walters there didn't just lose 40 places, Will. He lost 40 seconds on the track. That's what you need to do when you try and rejoin the track. It was good to see him rejoin safely, and like you say, I think these guys being led by the AAA Esports Black are going to claw back that gap. Max Verstappen in second place, has been setting a very steady pace, and now Warren is right on the back of him and looks to the inside, and there's contact.
My word, that's the 3rd time in this race that Dane Warren's been involved in an incident. Let's get another look at this one then, shall we? The 2nd time that these 2 cars have come together in this race. Dane Warren looks down to the inside, in towards, and again, that one looks to be a little bit like netcode there between the 2 of them. And Verstappen gets loose, and then that was a little bit more cheeky by Warren on the exit of the corner, because he had 2 wheels off the grass there coming under the Suzuki bridge. But, This is one of those races. I always say at Road Atlanta when we do Petit Le Mans commentary that there's a number of things that you always need to pay attention to. One of the biggest ones is your own emotions, and I think right now, the likes of Warren in particular might just need to start thinking about this. That every one of these moves he's making is losing another second to Kova, and that second here, that second there, as there's a replay going through. And actually, this one got even more interesting for a moment because BMW Sim Racing Yellow got into play, and I think that all of a sudden Verstappen and Dane Warren, the gloves are off between them, and as we go back to live pictures, Warren does get through there down into 10A and 10B, and I think someone from Redline might have just said to Max, you know what, Max, let him through, let him go. We want to get your car to Munich, and at this stage, none of you is going to get there, and the win will go to Kova.
Yeah, well, Kova now 7.5 seconds clear. They're smiling as they see this battling happening behind them. But if you're Dane Warren, I think you definitely had that red misdescend there. Well, you remembered that initial move from Verstappen into the chicane. You tried to repeat the feat. And, well, we know Max can be a little bit of a hothead at times. And both coming out of 10A and 10B and then down into turn 1, he did not want to give the place up, and it almost cost them a little bit more. They got stacked up towards 3, and contact was almost made.
Well, there is the Kova car of Thomas Tattler, and let's have a look at the lap gaps. And I mean, just look at that, 1.4 seconds lost in the space of 2 laps. That is the sort of thing which can be a difference maker here. I talked about it being about 35 seconds you need if you're going to make that second pit stop, Arjuna, and we are getting close to 1/4 of this race, and they're about 1/4 of the way there. So this is going to get, I mean, you and I, we're both Indy 500 fans, and we love this type of racing, this strategy starter racing. This is going to be one of those races where we do not know what's going to happen until the last 5 minutes. And the thing that I want to just bookmark for the end of this race, with Thomas Tattler pushing so hard, have the tyres to defend if he needs to, or even the tyres to attack each of those last couple of laps.
Because, of course, in these BMW M8s, well, you do not take tires and fuel at the same time. And, of course, Tumas is going to pass off the car to Valtteri Alander at some point in this race. And Alander's going to have the hard job to take the tires that Tattler's been pushing on and trying to preserve this pace to see if they're able to make this strategy work.
So, whilst all that mess was going on with Dane Warren and Max Verstappen, I did talk about it briefly. Phil Dean has got himself up into 3rd place, to 4th place season, the BMW Sim Racing Yellow car. I think the reason why that happened was down at turn number 1, there was that kind of funny business starting to develop between Warren and Verstappen, and because of that, the Vendevold car is just like, you know what, I'm going to go up, and he gained 2 positions at the places, getting past AAA Esports Black and BS Competition.
Yeah, and there's been some more issues. I'm just looking at my timing screen right now and going back to the replay. Alejandro Sanchez, well, we mentioned the strong season he's had in the Porsche Esports Super Cup. He just got forced off the track at the last corner by the Astro Gaming Altus Esports car. So I think a lot of these guys now, they're seeing the Kova car start to check out of the race here, and they're realizing they need to start getting some more track position at this point.
What do I always say at Indianapolis, though? If you're going to do a strategy, you need to stick to it. At this stage, some of these drivers, if they're 12 seconds back from Kova and they're starting to think all of a sudden that they need to get a move on, then they haven't saved enough fuel yet in order to be able to make this race work for them. They need, and this is why team managers become so useful in a situation like this. They need to be in their ear, telling them delta times, telling them maps, and all the fuel numbers that they need to do on a lap-by-lap basis. Can't be allowing your drivers to start thinking, do I switch my strategy 28 minutes into the race?
Absolutely, and we'll see if some of these teams are maybe just overcompensating in some ways for the Kova car's pace, but Phil Dean is doing a very, very good job at this point. We talked about his performances in the Road to Indy Virtual Series. Well, he's coming to GT racing now, Will, and doing a very, very strong job with the Vendeval team.
So that was your top 8, as we just saw up on your screen. And there is Alejandro Sanchez, MSI Esports 474 car right now, heading themselves through turn number 7. We have had some retirees out of this race already. Running some ports too. Unfortunately, being on pit road, they decided that is going to be their race done. Kova, the second Kova car, Pekka Turunen, is out. Well, they're not technically out the race. They've been on pit road now 24 minutes. Urano Esports HP car, that's got Sebastian Schollenbach behind the wheel, who, if you might remember, was involved in that very contentious issue down at Daytona. They are out of the race, and AAA Esports Green and Chris Lundman out of the race. But we're looking on board with Alejandro Sanchez. He said a couple of moments ago, Arjuna, pushed out wide at the final corner, now just trying to get back up a few places. 31 minutes of the race already scored complete, and of course they want to be in touching distance from when the pit starts. And I think that some of these might see them get to the point that with maybe 10 minutes to go before it ends, decide to just accelerate out a bit to get some separation, because this pit road don't always want to have 10 people coming on it at the same time.
Especially with what is a very, very tricky pit entry. It's almost like a series of 2 or 3 corners that work their way down into that pit entry, and getting down to speed is important, but also not losing too much time as you come down onto the entry. And we've watched this 3-car train come down. I just wanted to point out something, Will. We're seeing some cars, that Cooper Webster Altus Esport car in front of Alejandro Sanchez. He's up 9 positions, as is Christopher Dambietz in the red line. I'm not going to call it the green car, but it is the green car in front of him. There you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. Also take a look, though, at the Williams Esports Chill Blast car. They got pushed off at the start of the race, and Lasse Back is on the fight back of his life right now, really just moving through the field in a very, very clinical way.
Yeah, we do apologise for some of that text being a little bit small. It's not our fault. We promise. It's the teams that just got such a long time at point. But don't forget also, live timing and scoring is available. Visit racebot.wtf/BMW, brought to you by our friends over at Timing 71. So that is racebot.wtf/MW. So we go down to the second pages. Apex Racing Team, horrible for them. 28 places down, they've lost. Team RLL, they are down 17 places in this event. And then we go to that very bottom page, and, well, there's not a lot you can really say apart from disaster for that RHE sports car, although they have gained up 6 places, Arjuna, since we last saw them.
Yeah, Walters is a man on a mission right now, just trying to gain back as much track position as he can. There's a lot of work still to do, but he's got about 25 minutes or so before he hands over the car to his teammate. We'll see what he's able to do. We jump back on board with, though, Kei Kashube, who we talked about earlier. Well, he's up 1 position as a result of Walters dropping down through the field. But he's got a roadblock in front of him right now. That AAA Esports black car is a little bit off the pace as compared to those drivers in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th right now.
So, as Kei Kashube, just having a look, this group is about 10.6 now behind your race leader. Interesting to note is that Dane Warren is trying to drop Max Verstappen, but Dane Warren, the last 2 laps, has gained about a third of a second over Kova and Thomas Tattler. But Dane Warren is not going to allow Kova to really pull away. He's put the pace up a bit. Interesting strategy here by Coanda. And, I mean, you can look at this from a number of different directions, to be honest. Did Dane Warren save enough in the draft? I say the answer to that is most certainly not. But we know Coanda have a good history of saving fuel. Or, dare I say it, did Dane Warren just goad Verstappen into burning more fuel now?
Well, I'm also just looking at the lap times of the car out front right now, Will, and we saw Tattler with that super fast 15.384, but since that lap, he's kind of calmed the pace down a little bit and very consistently around the 15.9s and 16.0s, and well, Dane Warren the last few laps has started to pick up the pace. I just wonder if both of these cars now are doing minor fuel saving, I would say. Maybe Tattler has realized that his strategy wasn't going to give him the gap he needed to make that free pit stop, and maybe the strategies are ever changing now, as we still have 25 minutes left before the window opens.
I would love to actually have at least one of these cars. Try and do it on a two-stopper. Put in some Michael Schumacher 1998 Hungary qualifying style laps. You can do it here, and of course the second half of the race becomes easier. Do that a little bit because you're not going to get up behind 10 cars. You need a lap in quick succession. Of course, there are no blue flag rules in this series. Blue flag rules are informational only, and that means it's the responsibility of the passing driver, aka the one that's trying to put the lap down, to execute safe and pass, and there is no requirement for the driver about to go a lap down just out of the way. And you will end up situations, especially towards the back half of the field, when you will see the drivers just slide a little bit. But as we work through the pit seat, especially that second pit stop, it will start to get more confusing. I wouldn't necessarily have to rely on making big moves. What we always had there, big moves going on between AAA Esports White and Logitech G Outer Sports. Simone Maria Marcello, Mr. Pizza Man in the number 43 car. Andreas Joachimsen in the number 210 AAA Esports White car. These two have had so much great racing together over the last year.
Yeah, and Simone Maria Marcello, he's not competing in the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup. However, he's had some very strong performances in the Porsche Esports Sprint Challenge that occurs right before every one of those Super Cup races, and now in this BMW M8. And part of this Altus Esport crew, they've fallen off a little bit from some of the cars around them. There's almost 4 seconds up to the Vendaval Sim Racing pink car in front, and hopefully these two aren't going to squabble it out too much, because there you can see those cars in front. There's a big group, and if they can get back up to the rear of that train, they'll be in a very strong position come that pit window.
As we go from one Altus Esports car in a battle to another one in a battle. This is a Team Redline red car, which again I still think is not red but is green. But hey, and then you've got the Astro Gaming Altus Esports car, Cooper Webster. That car is definitely orange, blue, and white. I know that one for a fact. But they're separated by 2 seconds on track. I think that Team Redline red car is a sleeper here. I've got a feeling that they are going to be right in it at the end of this race, because Christopher Dambeats is such a good driver when it comes to things like fuel management, tyre management. And as I say that, that's Keika Shube, who goes wide at turn 7. That lifts up then Christopher Dambeats up a position on the track.
Yeah, and that's a free spot. And I think as we get a replay now, that red line crew at Spa last time out, was very, very strong. And Keika Shube, I think, just getting a little bit too deep under the brakes and had to go straight to avoid making contact with the AAA car in front. Yeah,
that was a choice there for the Keika Shube car. So I run into the rear of someone at turn 7B, and that someone would have been Carlos Dieguez, or do I just, go a little bit wide? He took the second option and just rolled off the throttle, went a little bit wide. He knows he's done so many laps at this track as Keika Shube in the virtual world. He knows much this track at a micro-millimeter level, but he does lose position. As so interesting at the same time, might get a little bit more of a help in terms of saving fuel there, although he does pull out on the replay that we were showing there, heading down into 10A, 10B, which is always interesting because the best way of saving fuel is not to pull out of.
And I think he was just trying to fend off the attack of Cooper Webster behind, who, like we say, is on a charge of his own. But now Christopher Dambeats up 10 places from the start. And Will, I wanted to make a point about the traffic, and unfortunately, the red line crew might not like remembering this, but Alexander Thebe in that red line blue car at Spa was on a charge of his lifetime until, unfortunately, he encountered a slow-moving traffic car into La Source. Contact was made, and as far as we understand it, he hit the DQ limit for incident points, got disqualified for the race for having too many contacts. Hopefully, a lot of these cars will not be in that same position here today.
Yeah, and in terms of the disqualification limit, I think it's 17 allowed over the race. Of course, this track, you don't get as many 1X, as we like to call it, off-track penalty. 1X is defined basically if you run off wide. For example, down here at turn number 3, and all 4 wheels will go off to the left-hand side of the racetrack over the yellow or the white line. then you get yourself what we call a 1x incident point. Spinning or losing control of your car will give you an incident point. And then if you were to hit another driver, well, that can be anything 0x, if it's very light contact, all the way up to 4 incident points. And drivers, especially in close proximity, remembering the fact that the last thing they want is to end up having car-to-car contact. And we talk about that. We've got to talk about it in the sphere and the scope in some regard of your second and third place drivers. 2 points to note here. I mean, Dane Warren and Max Verstappen, Dane Warren's been involved in 4 incident race. There's a good chance he could be close to that incident point limit already with 40 minutes of the race scored complete. But also, look at that. 0.2 seconds now ahead of Max Verstappen, starting to close in to Battler. Dane Warren's given up on this whole idea of sitting there, waiting around, because I think maybe one of the things he's worried about is hitting that incident point limit. And it's safer to do this when you're running by yourself.
Yeah, and the gap between the top 2 cars now, 6.5 seconds. So Dane Warren really pushing hard, and Verstappen is now feeling the pressure from the Road to Indy driver Phil Dennis right behind him as well. Verstappen now 8.5 seconds behind your leader, so Verstappen's still committed to whatever strategy he was doing, Will, with the VRS team and Kova teams responding to each other in likewise kind.
And of course, there's another issue now for Verstappen, because he's not in the draft of anyone. It means that he's helping out this number 51 car of Phil Dennis. But Verstappen is the one punching that big hole into the air. And that means that he's not going to be able to finish Ableton. So, for Verstappen, it seems to be all the cards are falling in the wrong direction right now. But we've got to remember the fact that realistically, we want these drivers to get to, put it safely, about the 1 hour mark, of course. Make it to 9 minutes pace, then you're probably going to be okay if you save at the same rate. You've got to remember we had a full pace lap here for this event, Arjuna, but at the same time, you've got to remember you could end up with a full lap to go at the end, depending on how those cards come down with the white flag coming out, time expiring.
Yeah, and some of the drivers I talked to pre-race were unsure, because obviously, Will, a lot of these teams are spending hours just planning out the strategy, and they're unsure about how many laps this race was actually going to be in. So that really affects your fuel strategy, affects when you want to come down and pit. And like I was saying, there are some drivers who want to push this first stint out as far as they can to make sure that second stint is A, as short as possible, and B, they'll try and do the overcut by filling a little bit less fuel in the tank, spend a little bit less time in pit lane, and be able to gain some track position potentially.
I would not overcut here at all. I would never try to just underfill the car. This is one of those racetracks where I would put the fuel up as much as possible. At the end of the day, come to 10 minutes to go in the race and you find out that you've got an extra lead, then you can just go and blink. There'll be plenty of places around this racetrack where you can burn that fuel. Worth noting as well that these gaps have started to really separate out inside your top 10. Here's a look at the AAA Esports black car, and all of a sudden, from having 10 drivers separated by about a second, got to a point where the top 10, so P number 2 for 12, now separated by 8 seconds back. So they are separated out a little bit more, even though this kind of third battle pack is the one which is closest together.
And Dan Beats is making slow progress on the AAA car in front of him right now. There you can see the lap gaps. It's just about maintained, even with the addition of the draft. Seems like the Team Redline red car is doing a little bit of fuel saving, but now this long run down the back straight. This AAA car punching a hole. He's got no help around him. You can see Christopher Danby is just looking for that draft, and all the cars behind him as well doing the very same thing. Even though 2nd through 13th might not be as close as it was before, well, 5th through 15th is about the same.
Yes, it is. It's why is Christopher Danby? I would just be a little bit closer. I don't know if you agree, but I would be maybe 2 seconds closer, get maximum efficiency there. I just think at 7 tenths of a second back, he's thing. Some of that advantage he's gaining if it wasn't for the fact he was stuck up right behind him, especially down the long straightaway.
Yeah, definitely. But I wonder if he's just sticking to his fuel number, not trying to push a little bit too hard to close that gap, because the one thing I say in the IndyCar series, Will, is you can't just start fuel saving midway through a stint. You need to know what the number is from the very first lap and commit to it with everything you have. So Christopher Dambiet, he is a World Championship driver. He's got Kei Kashubi behind him as well. There's some pressure there as well. Let's see what he decides to do. The gap definitely closing. Kashubi gets a little bit on the grass. It rotates the car a little bit extra there, able to hold on to it. And now getting very, very close to the red line car in front as they head down the back straight.
Yeah, it looks like Danby's had a horrible 7A. We'll let this one roll out first, because Kei looking as though he might want to go down to the inside into 10A, and he does. So I was right. I did look as though that Christopher Danby had a bit of a mare through turn 7A, and I think that what we saw, the back end of that with Kei Kashubi. But let's have another look then, shall we? And this is a Team Redline red car. Christopher Danby coming into 7B. See, it again, these drivers are so good at it. You don't see them going that far offline, but something about that angle of attack into 7B didn't look completely right to me.
Yeah, just a little bit too much speed on the entry into the corner, and then compromise the exit speed as well. But we'll get another replay here coming through turn number 6. Turn 6, you can take a little bit more speed because it's cambered in, Will, but it's very important to set up for 7. I think he just breaks a little bit too deep into the corner. There you can see as well a big fistful of opposite lock there.
It's almost as though we know what we're talking about once in a while. But yeah, so that has changed around. Kei Kashubi is making up the positions that he lost a little bit earlier on. So, of course, earlier on, Kei Kashubi, who had that moment down at 7B, which then allowed Christopher Danby to go past, that's been flipped around. So now it's PS Competition back up into 6th place, and Team Redline Red down in 7th place on the track. And we still got, of course, Andres Sanchez trying to gain up some places earlier when he had an off down at the final corner on track. Tell you what, Williams East cars, I have to be right when I say this of any team days, a little bit underwhelming, is what I'm going to say. Now, this might change dramatically after pit stops, and the reason why I say that, Arjun, I said quite clearly, there'll be some people who will go into ultra aggressive saving at the start. They will not want to basically gain a position at all. All they want to do is stick in the tour. And of course, Lasse back in the number 2, Daniel Lafonte in the number 3 are right there in that pack. But at the same time, I do worry about the fact that if they're going to be 12th in line coming on the pit road, that's a lot of cars they need to pass. They have managed.
Well, I see the Williams team manager in our YouTube chat, Will, and I'll defend the team's honor in this case because we saw them dominate much of the Spa race, running 1, 2, 3, and 4 for a long portion of it. However, today we talked about the issue that Lasse Back had at the start of the race. We didn't get a great look at it on the stream. However, both Lasse Back and Daniel Lafuente are down 9 and 5 places respectively. They've had a little bit of an issue. They're now trying to fight back, and I wonder if further back in this pack, Will, they've just realized that saving a little bit more fuel here, no matter how they decide to approach this strategy with 10 minutes left until the pit window truly opens, they may just have a little bit more flexibility in what they want to do in the pit lane.
Yeah, I did just see Marina Sirica, by the way, just lose a boatload of places on my timing screen. I want to have a look back at this, just in case he might have run wide down at 10A and 10B and outbraked himself. Comes through the left-hander. Then goes wide a little bit. He goes off there, gets pushed off track down at 10B. And then from then, it is like a freight train at Texas Way in an oval. You're on that outside line, and before you know it, you basically lost yourself a handful of places.
Yeah, a little bit of argy-bargy there from Simone and Maria Marciano, not really wanting to leave a car's width on the exit of the track. And we should also point out, Will, the Williams team doing very well in the World GT Championship. You can catch that on Monday night's Race Spot TV coverage presented to you by Paul Smith and Chaz Draycott, and it's been some of the best racing. The Williams team has been very strong in the BMW Z4. So another BMW class, a car in a different class, but the Williams team's always very strong when they show up.
They are. Let's go back up, shall we, to this battle, and actually let's show you your top 8, because it's getting interesting. The gap between Kova and Coanda now down to 4.3 seconds. Gap between Coanda and Team Redline up to about, well, it was about 4.3 seconds when it started this link. Then you got Vanderwassen Race Yellow right behind Team Redline Orange. AAA Esports Black in 5th place. Brunner Sud Competition in 6th. Team Redline Red and Astro Gaming Altitude in 8th place. And we're going to know in about 8 minutes' time how hard working these have been at the start of this run. Because in about 8 minutes' time, we're going to start. I mean, happen. You're 3.8 seconds back from Dane Warren. Flashing your lights isn't going to help there, my friend.
Well, I think the reason he's flashing, Will, is your leading pack has started to make its way through lap traffic. Kova, Thomas Tattler had to go to the inside of one of the lapped cars into the chicane, and I think these drivers are now seeing these cars in front and putting those headlights out as a warning. I'm coming through, even though the iRacing regulations don't necessarily say, Will, that you should get out of the way. This is a 2-hour race. Once you get that blue flag, your race is pretty much over from a perspective of trying to compete at the top. And if you see Max Verstappen in your rearview mirror, you might be a little bit worried that you need to get out of his way.
Yeah, there's always famous stories about the bright yellow helmet of Ayrton Senna back in the day, and people about the way before blue flags were really as a thing. We're on board with Verstappen. He's coming up behind some lap traffic right now. Hopefully, he'll get to that on the exit 7B, that he'll get it on the run down to the 10A 10B complex as comes out of here. Yep, traffic moves immediately to the right-hand side. Jobs are good, and there is one more piece of that traffic, which it will probably catch about turn 5 the next lap.
Yeah, and I was just taking a look at the entry list, Will. So Verstappen, only maybe 8 minutes left in this car right now. He's going to pass it off to Patrick Moser, who is a very, very quick driver in his own right. Let's see what he's able to do with the position that he's established. Phil Dennis behind him as well. I'm trying to take a look at who his teammate is going to be. It looks like it's going to be the Aussie, Joshua Anderson, a Porsche Super Cup driver, as we see cars start to come down into pit entry, and that's where the difficulty can be.
Well, and also at this stage, I know Tom Mackel probably did that because he's letting people out the way, but what he's done as a consequence is basically just ruined his race, because now he will have to stop again. As we're looking at, this is your mid-pack. This is like sort of running some sport. Red Face Racing by JRT. Williams, thank you. Wild Animals, Orca. That is one of the most interesting names we've Facebook TV broadcast in quite some time. The vibrant yellow car there. HM Engineering and Commander Sim Sports number 18. Backham, there thereabouts. Of course, Backham involved in an early on in this race, and that's the reason why that number 18 car is running down in the 4th position on track. But let's go back to Kova. We talk about the fact that pit stops are starting. We are looking, these drivers, as I say, if they can make it to 59 minutes remaining, Arjuna, that's when as a team manager I start to breathe a little bit more.
And I'm just looking at the wonderful data provided to us by Timing 71. Tattler's best lap time, a 15.384. Warren's best lap time, now that he's picked up the pace, a 15.575. However, the average lap times, well, you look at Tattler, 15.982 is his average. Warren behind him, despite all the incidents he's had, Will, a 16.056. There is not much time in it between these two teams at all. And as Warren continues to chase down the leader right now, I think it's going to be very interesting if that gets a little bit closer as a result of the pit stops.
You just joined us and you're watching live online. Hello, welcome to this, the 5th edition of the BMW Sim 120 Cup here on RaceSpot TV. I want to give a shout out to our partners over at VCO, as well as BMW Motorsports Sim Racing, as well as our friends over at Timing 71 and Esteban Barao Track Cams for Gourmets. If you're just joining us and you're looking at these gaps thinking, well, this is looking a little bit boring, don't go away just yet, because it's about to get incredibly interesting in the next 10 minutes. Plenty of strategic storylines to start talking about. I'm starting to notice a lot of drivers starting to think about maybe making a move down into 10A, 10B. Here's the next important thing, Arjuna, coming on towards pit road. I do not want to be balked by a driver who's being a little bit more careful coming on towards pit road, not slinging it down on that road on towards pit road.
And by the same token, well, you can be a bit worried about the cars behind you maybe being a little bit too optimistic. However, something else that I've just noticed is traffic is starting to play a big factor here. We saw the AAA Esports black car being piloted by Carlos Dieguez. Well, he was struggling a little bit for pace, but he's now pulled out a almost 3-second gap, I believe it is, to Keika Shube. So there is an interesting battle being happening up and down this field right now, and it's just going to be even more interesting as that pit window approaches.
Yeah, don't forget, by the way, the iRacing Petit Le Mans, powered by VCO, will be live here on RaceSpot TV. It is my most fun endurance race of the year to run. And I know that there's the Daytona fans, there's the Le Mans fans, sorry, Northwest France racing fans, so on and so forth. So we just see, by the way, Team Redline Blue, Gianni Vecchio and R8G getting close together there. The two Williams cars also very close together as they worked into 10A and 10B. So here's a replay of this one. And so there's the R8 car coming up behind. Moves to the left-hand side, easy pass down into 10A, 10B. And again, just coming into shot then. The two Williams cars make a little bit of contact through 10B there. But in that broadcast, we always do a little bit of RaceSpot bingo card for the Petit Le Mans Arjuna. I always say, one of the things you've got to really remember, this is the track where you will, at some point, lose a second and a half or 2 seconds when you're running in a prototype. Even in a GT car, even in a one-make race, you can still be in a situation where you can lose a second a lap just because of where you catch the traffic. There's nothing you can change that. The only way it will impact on you is if you let it get into your head and you start trying to chase that lap time and not remember that down the road, the person ahead of you, the person behind, might have a similar moment.
Yeah, what I always say when I'm racing the Petit Le Mans is what goes around comes around. You may lose a second or two, especially through the S's, if you catch some slower cars, but needless to say, other cars will struggle at later points in the race. And of course, VCO presents the iRacing Petit Le Mans in a few weeks' time, and we're delighted, Will, that it sounds like Radio Le Mans is going to have full commentary coverage of that race, with the broadcast obviously still being powered by RaceSpot TV. But it's been great to have the Radio Le Mans crew this year helping us on these special events, and it's going to be even more exciting having them for all 10 hours.
Yeah, that's going to be incredibly fun. And of course, great work by the Radio Le Mans crew over at Circuit de la South this weekend. I had the chance to listen to bits of coverage from across the major commentary. Of course, we had the Radio Le Mans crew. We had the world feed, let us say, which had Martin Haven and on it. Of course, the Eurosports coverage, Mark Cole and co. Great work by all of those guys, and working in endurance race. And so many of them at my time, production-wise, comment-wise, they're always so difficult to do. And
sorry,
great
Will.
job. What's the issue?
I'm going to cut you off because Max Verstappen, well, our YouTube chat doesn't like that we talk about him so much. Last lap, he had an issue with a lapped car into turn number 1, and he's back down your order right now, all the way down in 13th place.
Oh, my word. Let's have a look. So, Max Verstappen, he's had horrific luck the last couple of weeks across motorsports. Let's try and find a way of showing you this one. So this will be roughly where we're looking at. Max Verstappen in the number 72 car. And of course, he had such a horrific run at Mugello in the Formula 1 World Championship, and that was starting to turn number 1 into the wall there for Max Verstappen. Let's get ourselves a look from our overhead coverage looking at this one. Let's try and break it down. Coming into the corner, and there. Oof. I think that's going to be a case of what was the lap traffic intending to do coming into that corner?
But at the same point, Will, I wonder what Max is trying to do there. He looked to the inside, but at that speed, he was never making the corner. He was always going straight on. Unfortunately, they're just getting... This is where we talk about the importance of lap traffic, where we literally just discussed it. But let's jump back to live pictures as soon as we can, because Tumas Tatala, Dane Warren, and Phil Dennis, they're all down on pit lane right now.
Okay, so your top 3 teams, top 4 of your top 5 teams, all on pit road at the same time. So for Thomas Tattler, he's made it to the 1 hour mark. So whatever they've been doing, whatever rocket fuel they've been putting into that 707 car, they managed to get it working to the end of that first stint. And it is Valtteri Alander now getting in behind the wheel of that number 707 car. Of course, this is that stage where you basically say, oh, you know, reminder, we are not taking tyres. But for Valtteri Alander, he knows that he should have a 4-second advantage over the Coanda Sim Sports driver, now being piloted by Tommy Erskard. 34.6 seconds then. Out and away for Valtteri Alander. Over 1 have led every single lap of the day, and thankfully for them, they come out just ahead of a piece of traffic. Or is actually, no, that's not traffic. That's Evolution Racing Team then. So that would have been temporarily 4th position.
Yeah, and 3 cars did, in that at least leading group, will have managed to extend it 1 more lap. It was Alejandro Sanchez, Diablo Casbon in that second RHG car, and then Mikhail Gard. And in fact, Sanchez is managing to do an extra lap here. Casabon down onto the pit lane. Let's see what Sanchez decides to do. But just something to point out, Will, our YouTube chat has managed to chime in here. Unfortunately for Verstappen, he uses the Fanatic Direct Drive wheel, and that wheel appears to have had a disconnect, resulting in that contact. So unfortunate for Max, but that's sometimes the reality of sim racing.
Someone needs to get him, at some point, a kind of the MOT for his equipment. Because don't forget, it's only been 13 months since he had that famous moment in the 24 hours of Spa when he lost his brake pedal. So I think that for Max Verstappen, of course, we're going to keep an eye out on Alejandro Sanchez because he is still out on track. He is one of the longest drivers. In fact, he is the longest driver to manage to stay out in this race so far. So they've had some difficulties, but Alejandro Sanchez, great in terms of fuel mileage. I think that for some of these top drivers, they need to have a virtual setup, MOT once in a while there, Arjuna.
Well, we don't like to plug specific brands here, Will, but obviously the team has a partnership with Fanatic, and it was released just this week that the Mercedes esports team has partnered with the SimLab team, so it's becoming increasingly common to have these sim racing tie-ins, and maybe the Fanatic team can help them out there, just get that setup a little bit more reliable.
Okay, the field will reset in a moment. Don't forget, Jamie Fluke is on an alternate strategy. This is because of the fact that they came in 10 or so minutes into the race. Sorry, about 15 minutes into the race, if I remember correctly. Sanchez is going to get out of that car for the race. He's done. It's taken a while for his replacement to get in, but it is Salva Talent getting in behind the wheel of that car. I noted that took about 5 seconds longer than it should have done there, Arjuna.
Yeah, and that might compromise them as they come back into the chasing pack. Valtteri Alander, though, around the start-finish line. There you can see him going down into turn number 1. He's retaken the race lead there, as now the Tommy Ostergaard piloted Coanda car as well. Salva Talent is still on the box. This is a long stop, 35 seconds in the box. To be honest, though, Will, I'm comparing it with everyone else. It lines up pretty much identical. Stops between 34 and 35 seconds, so not that long, and he's going to come out right next to that Altus car.
Oh, yes. But you've got to remember, he took about 3 laps less of fuel compared to everyone else. But that looking through the pit stop times, it was 34.6 for Kova, 34.1 for Coanda, 34.8 for Vendevel, 34.8 for Astro Gaming L2C Sports, and a 35 flat for MSI Esports. So they did lose something there because of that extension on the driver change.
They lost a little bit there, but Will, they've jumped up 3 spots as a result of going 2 laps longer here. So that traffic play, or rather that pit strategy play, has played out nicely for the MSI team. Take a look back at Valtteri Alander piloting the 707. They're waiting for Jamie Fluke to come back down the lane. We saw Fluke in the Apex car coming down about 15 minutes into the race, or maybe 10 minutes before Fluke gives up the race lead again. But there's the gap to Tommy Ostergaard, 3.8 seconds. And what's Ostergaard going to be able to do here? Warren was on a charge. He's now got to pick up right where he left off.
Oh, no. Tommy is charging right now. We've only got a couple of laps, of course. But actually, I say that. It looks like that gap was coming down more than it is. So, of course, the timing never lies, except for when it does. But it looks as though it's only been a tenth, but that gap is about 4.5 seconds. When I first noted it coming out of pit road, it stays at about 4 seconds. Now, it is worth noting that these two teams, according to your maths, do need to save a little bit of fuel on this run as well. So it's not going to be a case of they've done their pit stop, they can just go, you know, flat out to the end of the race. Because of course what they did in the first run, they've kind of got to replicate in the second run as well.
And don't forget as well, they're on the older tires that their teammates have already used, and something else that's a factor, well, the track temperature has climbed a few degrees over the course of the race. It's now up to 38 degrees Celsius. There we take a look at the entire conditions for the race. It's partly cloudy. We might see that temperature fluctuate a little bit in this next 55 minutes.
And that will not dramatically impact in terms of fuel economy, but it might do a little bit. You might be looking at somewhere in the region of third to half a lap over the course of this run. So, for those of you who are wondering why Jamie Fluke is still out there, came in, as I said, about 10-15 into the race. He topped off from fuel. We think he might have got a tiny bit of damage repair as well. That Apex Racing number 99 car, but let's be honest, Apex Racing haven't had the most of inspired days apart from this, because of course the Team RLL car, which is the partnership with the IndyCar team, the Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing team car, they were out in an incident in turn number 1 on lap number 1. The other Apex Racing car involved an incident early on. So this is the only Apex car who we think is going to have a good run to the end. But you notice the fact they are building up a gap over Cobra because they are going flat out because they are on a 2 strategy.
Yeah, they're going to lose at least, I would say, 50 seconds or so once they do come down the pit lane, Will. They'll have a little bit less fuel to obviously put in, but it's going to drop them all the way to the end of the lead lap. And unfortunately for this partnership between Apex Racing and Team RLL, it was a very successful partnership at this year's 2020 iRacing Indy 500. Brandon Traino not only becoming the first 2-time Indy 500 winner in the iRacing service, he did it by being the first driver to win it in back-to-back years. Unfortunately, not getting the same level of success here today, but Zach Campbell has jumped into that car, taking over from Kevin Ellis Jr., still on the lead lap, and there's still a long way to go. Let's see if hopefully both of these cars can do a little bit further. Let's now jump back to the battle in that front group, though. We jump on board with, I believe, the BS competition car as he tries to chase down AAA Esports Black.
Yeah, and at some point, I will be able to allow Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing to roll off the tongue without me having to remember the order. When you've got 3 team owners all represented in a name. But to go back, as I say, to this battle, P7PA, AAA Esports Black, Ricardo Ferreira, the lap times to say, in this pack, the lap times aren't really as much of a discussion point. But the thing is that Neil's coach is now behind the wheel of that number 7 car, which is piloted by KK, is in 8th place on track. How do you do it now, then, Arjuna? Because you made an interesting point earlier. You don't want to wait until the end of the race to save fuel. It's the normal rule of thumb. But how important is the track position now compared to, you know, we get to maybe 20 minutes to go and everyone looks at their fuel tanks and says, okay, off we go, bye-bye.
I think they're going to be playing that balancing act. If it was me, I'd be doing a little bit of the extra fuel saving now because you know that the last 10 or 15 minutes are going to be totally crazy and you want to be able to defend and attack as much as you can. But of course, if you are in that BS competition car and you are Niels Koch, then you know, Will, unfortunately, you came in 2nd place at the Nürburgring round of the BMW Sim 120 Cup. You're not locked into Munich. We haven't talked about that too much since the start of the race. That is a very important trip that all of these drivers want to win, to be in Munich, to compete in that BMW Munich finale. Let's see what these drivers decide to do. They may decide to be a little bit more aggressive earlier on than stint.
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm really looking forward to being in Munich. We've got 8 drivers who have already punched their ticket. Max Benecke, Max Venig, Joshua Rogers, Mitchell Young. I want to put an asterisk on that and talk about that one in a bit. Lauren Heinrich, Alexander Voss, Sammy Matty Trogan and Augustin Canapino have all qualified, representing Redline Kiwana Simcorp, BS Competition and BS Competition Stroke Cup of Nations, as Jamie Fluke is on towards pit road. as he is getting out of the car, and it is going to be Antoine Higelin who is getting behind the wheel of that car right now. But Antoine Higelin is going to be piloting that car for the remainder of this race. 50 worth of racing to go, and he out of pit road in about 8 seconds time. I'm putting the asterisk on Mitchell de Jong, of course, because of the travel restrictions for Americans. I know, for example, as you know, we can't bring you to work with us in Munich because that was close, because of the restrictions flying into Germany from the Americas. And I don't think that Mitchell de Jong has yet emigrated over to the Commander House in West Germany.
Well, and something that just further complicates things for the American, Will, is that December 5th, which is the date for BMW Munich, is the same day as one of the rounds of the iRacing Rallycross World Championship that's going to kick off in just a week's time. And Mitchell is one of these drivers who is balancing the Porsche Esports Super Cup along with this iRacing Rallycross World Championship. Two of those rounds are going to conflict with each other. You have to wonder if Mitchell can really afford to miss another round when last year, Will, he would have won the championship in the iRacing Rallycross World Championship if he hadn't had to miss two of those races. Eventual winner Sammy Matty Trogan has punched his ticket to BMW Munich. He might be in the same boat of trying to decide if he wants to defend his title or head to Germany.
I tell you what, by the time we end up at the last round of the championship, I would have asked this questions organising team over for BMW Sim Live, and I will have an answer for you that I can put on us. Martin van Loozenhout in the number one car is just behind Niels Ocean, a bit of competition car, and again, more and more traffic coming into play here in this event. And even though we've seen a couple of major incidents in this race, we had one at the start. We've only had 3 retirees in Singapore. Rhino Esports HP and Green. So the Cobra 2 car has been sat on pit road for 64 minutes and 9 seconds. We've got 47 drivers around this racetrack, which, if I remember correctly, is more cars than you actually would have during the actual Petit Le Mans. So this is showing that this track is crowded right now. Unfortunately, we have got a glitch. We can't show you our track map to show you where everyone is. But this is a very crowded racetrack today.
Very much so. I mean, most of these Petit Le Mans, we don't see more than, I would say, 40 cars, let alone the 51 cars that took to the start of this race. And traffic, we talked about it being a big factor. We now jump on board with Andre Melchers, who is teamed up now with Urano Esports Huawei. He's trying to fight with Martin Christian in the Williams Esports Chill Blast car in front of him.
Wondering, are you allowed to say Huawei, or is your internet connection going to be off in America after that one? But yes, Williams Esports Blast then running a P14, Urano Esports Huawei in P number 50. Andre Melchers behind the wheel of that car right now. So, after Verstappen had that incident, and again, for those of you joining us, Verstappen, well, he's had it all today. He was in a big battle at the start of this race. He's been involved in incidents with Dane Warren at least times. At one point, it looked as though they were almost going to have some on-track fisticuffs. But then, as things started to settle down, all of a sudden, coming behind some lap traffic, technical issues for that Team Red Line orange car, got a Fanatic sticker on the side of the car. I was probably thinking if you Verstappen, they were hoping it was just going to be a little bit more competent in the engineering department, but they got that car back to pit road. Patrick Christoph Moser now behind the wheel, but that will be down to P13, and that could have got even worse for that car. A little bit of lap traffic, doing some lawnmower racing down on the entry turn 3.
And if you're wondering why Moser didn't try and fight that BS car in front of him, that BS car is a lap down. Moser not really in any battles for positions. He's got 5 seconds of separation in both directions at this point. Dakota Fripp in one of the Vendaval Sim Racing pink cars, and Martin Christensen, we saw that battle that he was having with Andre Melchers. One thing I just wanted to point out as well here, we jumped on board with Martin van Loozenhout a little bit earlier, Will. Well, Martin van Loozenhout, past the last season SCO P2 champion, has made the switch over to R8G Esports. We saw him teaming up with G-Drive Exemia last time at Spa, now in P number 7, driving for the Roman Grosjean team. Very interesting to see what he's been able to do. He's just been able to get past Neil Coke down into the chicane as well, up into 7th place. Let's see what happens.
Just been having a look then at the look between RHG Esports, Martin van Loozenvoort, and it's really good to actually have him finding a new home on track right now, as he has he's one of those drivers, Arjuna, who's really underrated at times. Sorry, I just got a little bit distracted there. Someone my ears, but for Martin van Loozenvoort, the RHG Esports car, it's going to be really interesting to see how he really delves into that team, because this is one of those esports teams that, yes, it has got a famous racing driver backing it, but they look as though that they are starting to develop into a substantial force in sim.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of burst onto the summer, into the scene in the summer when part of their team made the transition onto the team and then changed affiliations in the Porsche Esports Super Cup as well. But you talk about Martin being underrated, not but from myself. I competed against him in SCO last season, and I got my I'm going to try and be careful. He beat me on basically every occasion that he could. He is an amazing driver, and we saw this RHG team slightly earlier in the summer in other SCO competitions, the special events that they hosted over the summer, doing very, very well. And unfortunately, in the 6 hours of the Glen, they were on for a good win in the GTE class until, well, team owner Romain Grosjean had a few issues during his stint. So the sim drivers are very, very quick on this team. And guess what? Romain Grosjean doesn't just do this for fun. He's competing with all of these drivers. He's not in this split today. He's in one of the lower splits for the BMW Sim Cup 120. But Romain Grosjean definitely taking a very hands-on involvement in this team.
Yeah. So we've been looking on board of him for a moment. I wanted to go to the front of my field because the gap for a moment between Kova and Coanda had come down below 4 seconds on track. But it has increased again to 4.4 seconds, and it's that little cat and mouse game that you were talking about earlier that's really starting to become a thing. And for Kova, it's now also going to be a case of how much are they going to have in terms of their tyres at the end of this race, Arjun. I think that's the one thing that I potentially worry about, that it's just going to be on the back of my mind, as we can actually see they have got, is that another Coanda driver just ahead of them? Yes, it is. Well, we've had this one happen a couple of times this season when teammates and lap traffic becomes an interesting talking point. But let's see who this one is. It's something number 18 car. Having a look.
I believe it's
one.
Yes, being driven by Pash Gergis right now, and Kova just slowly getting to the back. Is he going to get out of the way into turn 3? In fact, no. You can see the lights being flashed right now from the Kova car. You talk about the tires here from Valtteri Alander as he finally gets his way by. I wonder what damage Dane Warren did in his stint, because he was pushing very, very hard in those last 20 or 30 minutes, Will, and slight lockups of the tire here, just maybe abusing the traction zones a little bit too much, can wear that tire that much more, and it's going to make the task for Tommy that much more difficult.
Yeah, and of course, we would expect when Tommy Erskard gets up behind his teammate, Pash Gergis is probably just going to move out the way. In fact, probably he'll end up driving around the near Motorsports Park, which is just opposite this racetrack, by the way. You've got two iRacing tracks literally on opposite sides of the road. You've got Lanier, which is one of the ovals that many people over the years have started their iRacing oval careers on. It is literally opposite this racetrack. In fact, sometimes in the overhead shot, you can even see it when we show that one to you. As we are just looking through your field, let's put the top 8 up then, actually. 40 minutes of this race to go. Now the feelings of everything has settled down. Over leading by 3.999 seconds over Koana Sim Sports. And we'll have a look at the lap gaps, the recent lap gaps between the two of them in a moment's time. Then you've got BMW Sim Racing Yellow. They are running in third place of MSI Esports in the fourth place. Of course, those of you wondering how they managed to jump up, they went longer than anyone else in that first stint. They were able to go 3 laps longer than your leading drivers. So a great job that was done early on then by Alejandro Sanchez in order to give himself the opportunity then to put that team into a better place in the second half of this race. Astro Gaming Altus Esports in P number 5 and AAA Esports Black in P number 6. R8G 7th place, and the Bruno Sud competition car rounds out your top 8. And let's have a look at those lap gaps here, Arjuna, because it is going to get really interesting to note this one over the last couple of moments in this race. And again, swings and roundabouts is what I can say with some degree of certainty there. Lap number 60, Tommy Erskine. This is why I was saying that it looked going down to about 3.1 seconds at one point, but then lap number 60, Erskine lost 7 tenths of a second. Lap number 61, it was a quarter of a second lost by Tommy Erskine. Lap number 62, Tommy Erskine was able to gain a quarter of a second. And last time around, as you flick over to Valtteri Alanda, it was a tenth of a second to the benefit of Alanda.
I think Alanda lost a little bit of time getting caught up behind the VRS teammate, Pash Gergis, just doing a little bit of a team job there potentially, but this battle is going to come all the way down to the wire. You talk about the tires, well, maybe Alanda just pushing a little bit more now, 40 minutes to go, trying to just extend the gap out a little bit. However, I'd just like to call attention to Sal Vitalins in that MSI car, because he came out of the pit lane. Well, we saw him come out in traffic in 6th or 7th place. He's now up into 4th place and trying to make some moves to get past and to pass some of this traffic and try and catch Joshua Anderson in front, who is now running all by himself, about 3 seconds in front of Sal Vitalins.
And it's worth remembering that there are points-paying prizes. You try saying that 10 times in a row. Points-paying prizes for those who finish inside the top 3. We talk heavily about the fact that the winners, they'll get $1,200 per person, but also they'll get themselves their trip. All expenses paid to Munich in December for BMW Sim Live 2020. But then also second place, $600 per driver, $300 per driver to those who come home in the 3rd place on track. So that is the reason why Sal Vitalins is getting a bit of a move on right now. And of course, if they had that good of a fuel mileage early on, they might not have to worry as much about fuel saving this run. Or at the very least, if Sal Vitalins can start just closing up that gap, get within the 1 second kind of draft range, and then just bide his time until the last 10 minutes of this race. These last 10 minutes are going to be rather insane. I've got a feeling we are going to see some metaphorical car-to-car fireworks at some point.
Oh, we might see the sparks in the iRacing sim as well, but you look at Jordan Caruso in the Altus car behind. You've also got Ricardo Ferreira in the AAA number 4. Martin Van Luzenoord's only 1.5 seconds behind this pack as well, trying to close up in that R8G number 1. But interestingly here, Niels Koch has just dived onto pit lane. I'm very surprised by this call. The BS car pitting at a very, very weird time, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. There's a reason why. Because that car doesn't have a front end on it.
That is big damage to the BS competition, and I wonder if potentially that the damage has already happened here. We may have to go all the way back to the S's. Well, there was an incident with a lapped car through the S's. That's what I'm seeing up on my replay right now, and big damage for BS competition. Here, we'll get a look at the replay now.
Yeah, so this is a look going through. Have I left it too long again, or did they try drive it for a lap? And then, or is this just a little technical scrambling on our end? Yeah, because there wasn't any contact there, but you can see the front end of that car completely torn to shreds. It was coach in that number 7 car. So, wow, that's going to be a shame. Of course, some would argue that outside of these top 3 places, it doesn't really matter where you finish. But a lot of these teams, of course, pride is a big thing that comes through in it as well. But that's going to be disappointing there because, of course, BS Competition have got 2 of their teams already qualified for Munich in December. They've got Lion Heinrich and Alexander Voss, as well as Sami Matti Trogan and Augustin Canapino. And let's be honest, I think the first person that you might have put onto that list was originally that other BS Competition team that we now see stats horribly on pit road. And because of the fact that, of course, let's start with Keika Shube, just as a simple example, it was coach, an incredibly talented driver as well. They've now got one more opportunity to qualify for Munich, and that will be, of course, in Interlagos.
So I'm just going to correct you, Will. Augustin Canapino and Sami Matitroga, not part of BS Competition.
Right, the Cup of Nations car.
Yep, and they were driving, obviously, under the Cup of Nations banner for Williams Esports. However, I'm taking a look at this replay again, and I don't know what else to say other than I don't know what this lapped damaged car is doing. He's very, very slow through the S's on the racing line, and unfortunately, Nils has no time to react, and unfortunately, due to the unfortunate difficulties of live TV, we're not going to be able to show you that replay, but I feel very, very bad for that BS team right now. Nils Koch and that team have been very strong in this BMW Sim Cup 120 over the entire season, and not going to be able to even try and compete here in the next half an hour.
I will counter your counter with the fact that BS Competition and Williams Esports are about as interchangeable as outfits at a Lady Gaga concert. So, I'm not a million miles wrong. But Astro Gaming LTC Esports, Jordan Caruso, and again, this is what we talked about before when we talked about lap traffic. I think this is one of those tracks that, in terms of the list of how I would rank them, if I was a lap down car and I was damaged, I would probably be more inclined to pull my car towards pit road and get it fully, completely repaired compared to most other tracks that would make up part of the IMSA or kind of World Endurance Championship side of things, anything like that. Because if I'm going to be honest, this is one of those tracks where, because it is so short and because it is largely narrow, especially in sector number 1, you haven't got anywhere really to hide. And you talk about, but if you lap down car, you can move out the way. It doesn't work here. It doesn't work here the same way you could at a track like Silverstone, or even a track like Watkins Glen is getting into that kind of middle ground. A road in America, for example, for the most part, you can easily move out the way and allow someone else to go past.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult here, and we talk about the time you can lose just in the S's if you get stuck behind the slower car, and we're going to see that in a few weeks' time, the iRacing Petit Le Mans, and I'm very excited for that because of the brand new addition to the sim. It's going to potentially just mean some crazy racing in our top split event, but let's take a look at a battle. We talk about VRS Coanda at the top of the field often, but Jeremy Bouteloup down in 14th place, and he's fighting with Momin Papin right now.
Yep, I love that team name. Alien Sarotti, sorry. Alien Sarotti. This is the reason why you don't get dyslexic people commentary. But running in 15th place with Roman Papin in the number 11 car. Again, absolutely gorgeous livery on that car. A little bit of fun coming through on there. But they'll work down to 7A and 7B once again. There's a lovely look at the yellow blocked name on the side of that car. And the kind of chromish and black livery paint scheme on it. Check in on Kova for the moment, and Kova are pulling out again, and the gap's up to 4.7 seconds on track, and we are 3/4 of the way through this race. So, lap gaps, there we are. Tommy Erskard, and it seemed to be that he gained lap number 69, he gained a 9. Didn't gain a 6, and he gained that on lap number 68. But Tommy Erskard, I think this is always one of these things as well. When it comes to the traffic, the leader always does get a little bit of an advantage compared to everyone else, because you know you're going down a lap, you know the leader's coming past. You don't want to be that person to be on a stream, on a broadcast, or anywhere, being told you just respect the leader. But as soon as you get towards, second, third, fourth, fifth place on track, they don't get that same level of alertness. I think it's the easiest way of saying it.
Well, I wonder, Will, if we're maybe seeing a very similar story play out to what we saw in the first stint of the race. We obviously saw Thomas Tattler really put the blinders on in those first few laps, pulled out a couple of second advantage, and then was able to gap the field up to about 7 seconds. But then about the last 30 minutes, that's when we saw Dane Warren really turn it up and close that gap in a little bit more. Maybe Tommy doing the same thing here. Now, Tommy's had a very, very good season in the Porsche Esports Super Cup, but it's been a little bit of a disappointment recently. We'll see if he's able to just gather up a little bit more of a strong performance here today, leading into the next few rounds of that championship as well.
Valtteri Landa, we've been riding a lap on board of him into 7B. See the speed. Yes, it's in kilometers an hour, unfortunately, because it's European-based broadcast first. Just divide by 8 and multiply by 5 and we'll be fine. Fine. As Landa is going to... I was wondering how long it would take for you to pick that one up, but it's okay. Coming down into 10A, 10B, 251 kilometers an hour onto the apex, through the right-hander, and then up underneath the Suzuki. I always say over the Suzuki bridge, but you go under the bridge, and then through the final corner. That's a lap on board of Valtteri Landa in the 707 car. Over. This is going to... I don't want to jinx it. I really don't want to jinx it. But if they do manage to get this victory and they do manage to punch their ticket, I think this is going to be absolutely incredible because of the fact, Arjuna, that we've essentially got ourselves 5 different teams, again, depending on how interchangeable you want to call BS competition, Williams esports combination, etc., etc., etc. But realistically, you've got 5 different teams that are going to be represented in Munich. So for all those who say that these big level competitions are all about the same, 2 or 3 teams who win absolutely everything, well, I'd like to take that comment and I'd like to show you the results that we're currently looking at.
And the biggest thing for me, Will, is that Kova is a esports organization. It's not just a sim racing team. They have teams that compete in other esports as well, League of Legends and Valorant. And it's a big community of Finnish esports gamers. And we're just bringing sim racing to a community that already loves its racing. So great to see the Kova team doing so well. I'm going to knock on some wood over here and say it's looking good for them with 27 minutes still to go. And Valtteri Landa doing a very, very strong job. Unfortunately for the other team, Kova car, that has some of the newer drivers on that team, it's not been as smooth. They don't appear to be even on track right now, but they continue to add to their team with some very, very strong additions. I believe the newest one, Will, Matti Sipula, who's left core sim racing to jump over. So big things I'm expecting from the Kova team as we head into the winter endurance season.
And I also think it's absolutely great to see a little bit of a resurgence in Finnish sim racing, because over the years we have had a couple of teams who are always Finnish-based, or majority Finnish-based. Of course, Glacier Racing were the first one of these that started in, and I know this date almost exactly, in November of 2011. They were entirely Finnish. And then we've had a couple of teams over the years which have been predominantly Finnish or Finnish, but not as big as Glacier Racing. And I think I would be fair in saying there was a period of time around 2017, 2018, where it just seemed to be that the kind of consistency of top-level drivers from Finland started to decline a little bit. But we're seeing that come back, and I think that Finland as a country, the way that they organise and they put all this stuff together in terms of sim racing, and it's going to be really exciting to see how that team will progress moving into 2021.
Yeah, and we talk about, it's not just 2021. Well, we've got, of course, a big season upcoming of Winter Endurance Championship. A lot of that going to be broadcast here on RaceSpot TV. I can't wait for that. And we're going to see this BMW M8 making a very strong appearance. It's one of the stronger cars in the GTE class right now. If we're going to use an esports term in the iRacing meta, if you're going to use the racing term, the balance of performance, it's a very, very strong car, very stable. And we ride on board with Team Redline Blue. Jonas Wallmeyer currently at the wheel trying to chase down his teammate in front of him.
As Jonas Wallmeyer, a lot of opposite lock there through the S's. And then you've got the Team Redline red car, which is still green, of Alexander Thebe just ahead. and Alexander Thebe in that number 74 car. Have a look from the rear spoiler of that car, because I do not want to start the whole YouTube arguments as to whether it's a wing or a spoiler. I'm going to call it a spoiler. We're going to move on. We'll go from there. But Jonas won by a 6/10 of a second back. Team Redline, I mean, they have shown some good promise in this race. But the biggest incident, of course, was the Team Redline Orange incident earlier on. Team Redline, I know they came in. You see Team Redline cars turn up to an event like this, you know they're looking for business. They weren't looking for prize money. They were looking for an extra ticket to Munich.
And I mean, Will, it's almost, we talked about it slightly earlier, it's almost as though Alexander Thebe in this the Team Redline red car right now is trying to make up for the issue that they had in Spa when he was racing for Team Redline Blue. They had a very, very strong performance. They drove through basically the entire field after a lap 1 incident there. Unfortunately, the DQ limit came back to bite them, and they're not locked themselves into the finale. They do have the one car that won at Daytona, obviously Max Weinig and Maximilian Benecke going to Munich. But if you're a team like Redline, you want to be doing more. So we jump back to a battle with Simon Feigl now, the team boss of Altus Esports, jumping into the 22nd place car.
Yep, so Simon Feigl in the number 43 car. Got G Altus Esports. Then you've got ahead of them Benjamin Gonzalez in the number 12. Redface Racing by JRT Machine, as they are just actually working out what lap they are on. They are working on lap number 76 in this race. So doesn't time fly here at Road Atlanta when you're having fun. Behind, you've got Apex Racing Team. This is the one that was on that crazy alternate strategy. Jamie Fluke was behind the wheel of that car at the start of the race. They came on towards pit road early on. I would be interested to know whether there was a tiny bit of damage that needed to get repaired, but they were only on pit road for 10 seconds. So it was, as far as we could tell, all about the splashing and the dashing. But for Antoine Higelin right now, the number 99 car, he is, 23rd place, and the gamble didn't really pay off for them.
Well, they're down 16 positions from their start, Will, so they were caught up in some of the turn 1 mess that we didn't really get a great look at the start. But for Anton Higelin right now, the Frenchman has some work to do. He can see a little bit of a gap between Rafael Razek in 19th place and Martin Christensen in the Williams car, who's 2 seconds ahead of this group that we're watching right now. So there is the potential to still get a very solid top 20 finish. Might not be what the Apex Racing team wanted from both the Apex Racing 99 and the Team RLL car further down the order, but nevertheless, you sometimes get dealt a bad hand at the start of the race, Will, and it's what you do, how you fight back from that, that really shows us up here in the booth what you want from this BMW Sim Cup 120.
Yeah, indeed. So when life gives you lemons, you either make lemonade or throw them out the car, is what I'd like to say. AAA Esports Black, they are running still in P number 6. We're going to head over to them momentarily because they are battling with another of the Altus Esports car. This is the Astro Gaming Altus Esports car, and this is the battle for 5th place on track. And again, no prize money for finishing in 4th and 5th, but of course it's a good way of getting some attention over to your sponsors. And the AAA Esports Black car, the kind of black and white with a little bit of green tinge to that one there. Have a look as he works at number 4 car through turns 7A, 7B, and then you've got just ahead of them, as I say, the Astro Gaming Altus Esports car, who, interestingly, we thought that the MSI Esports car that you can just see at the bottom of your shot, Talbot-Tannins, we thought they were going to drive away from those two cars and really start putting the pressure on Vendor Sim Racing Yellow. That's not entirely been the case with 21 minutes to go.
It's been a slow process, but Salva Talens has managed to pull away from the Altus 83, and he's slowly chasing down the other Australian out in front of him, Joshua Anderson in that 51 car for Vendaval. He took over from Phil Dennis. He's not necessarily been able to hold the gap to the cars in front. They're now just struggling a little bit more, I would say, at this phase of the race. And Salva Talens, we saw that team go 2 or 3 laps longer in the pit cycle. Well, he's managed to make the best use of the track position so far, and I think for Salva, there's a lot of work still to do. You can see that car in front of him. That will be his target, that podium position and the money that offers you.
Yep, $300 for each of the teammates. That would be to whoever gets that 3rd place And, well, it looks to be they are almost, and this is one of those things, remember they were talking about this on Eurosport's coverage of the 24 Hours of Le Mans earlier on, that it is incredible that we are at a position in sim racing as well as what we're seeing in things like GTE over at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, that you've got these drivers who are able to consistently lap within, you know, a tenth or so of their personal best or their session best, and everyone else is able to maintain that same level of consistency as well. And I think that one of the things that we talk about close racing is the fact that at this race there has not been, even Cova, there's not been anyone in this race who have been able to basically just drop the ball, run away and build up, you know, a 20-second advantage. The biggest advantage in this race today has been about 8 seconds.
And despite the fact that Tumas Tatula was trying to make that longer, he got pulled in by the VRS car, and I wonder if maybe they didn't... We talked about them maybe trying to think about the two-stopper wheel. I wonder if their strategy was always just pull out of that draft, make it that much more difficult for any car behind to try and do any fuel saving. And then once they got the gap, they just set to work, did their fuel saving, hit their number. And this is what we talk about at the top level of sim racing. It's not just about the drivers on track, it's about the entire team, about how they work together to devise the strategy, and what the team managers often are talking to the drivers in their ear. There is so much in-race management that goes on as well. It cannot be understated just how impressed I am, rather, with the Cova team and their entire effort so far.
Yeah, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago when we started to get to the point that most of these big teams were relying heavily on kind of like live telemetry in order to help them in terms of their decision making. We've now moved to the point as when Sim Racing Pink is going to get past the Team Red Line Blue car, Jonas Warmbier. I am allowed to call this a pink car. I won't make any jokes because if you look very, very, very carefully, there you are, pink wingtips. Sorry, I don't even know what they're called. Wing mirrors. There we are, on the side of that car. So that's how you differentiate the BMW Sim Racing cars. Dakota Fripp up into 9th place. But as I was saying, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, it was the teams really getting into live telemetry for decision making. In the last 2 to 3 years, it really has been the fact that you rely as heavily, especially at this level of racing, in terms of having the crew, you know, back a house, looking at the numbers in real time, making those strategy decisions. If I pit, where will I come out? And doing all those calculations that you couldn't really do in a racing car. And I think this is what's brought this competition even closer together. And I think from what I saw at BMW Sim Live last year is the pro drivers, of course, those who are part of the BMW factory program, just blown away by the level of commitment and detail and organisation that goes on in sim racing. That, of course, is never going to be as big as the BMW factory teams, but is getting closer and closer to that level.
And what we've seen as well is a lot of those BMW factory drivers will have done a lot of sim racing this year. Of course, there was some conflicts this weekend that will preclude them from being able to compete in this race as well, but we've seen them in previous BMW Sim 120 Cup races. We've also seen them driving with BS competition in some of the biggest iRacing events of the year. So the real drivers are seeing all of this increasing professionalism on the sim side and getting very, very excited about it. And that is awesome to see as sim racing kind of evolves now. We have to use the momentum over the past few months to really kickstart sim racing as we continue to grow as an esport.
Indeed. So, getting a replay up then. This is going to be between the Bruno Sud competition car and Williams Esports BenQ. Neil's coach in the number 7 car. Just catching the curb a little bit there to try and arc out that corner a little bit more through turn number 12. Going down to the inside of the Bruno Sud going down to the inside of the Williams Esports BenQ car. One thing I am going to be interested to learn over the next kind of 6 months or so is how Williams will continue to commit to kind of sim racing after the kind of change in management being bought out. And of course, the Williams family no longer involved in the running of the Williams, I think it's technically called Williams Engineering, but of course, you know, the Williams F1 team, etc.
Well, of course, we partnered with them for the VCO Cup of Nations, and it was great to have that level of commitment there, and I'm hoping to see it continue, Will. One news that did get released this past week was Sammy Manny Trogan has signed another contract with the Williams Esport team, in addition to signing a real-life contract with the Walkenhorst team to compete in some of the German VLN races and whatnot. So, the commitment to sim racing clearly still there, and we're not seeing Sammy Manny Trogan in this race today, and it's been a little bit more of a struggle for the entire Williams team. The highest car that they have in the field is in 11th. But let's take a look at the battle further up. Ricardo Ferreira trying to close in on that Altus car. They have really dropped off the tail of Salva Talens, and Salva Talens is now 1 second behind Joshua Anderson. These two are doing whatever they want on strategy, but falling off this fight for that final podium place.
They are, and we're getting to what I like to call the witching hour. I said it'll be about 15 minutes to go when this race will come alive a little bit more. And for MSI Esports and Joshua Anderson's BMW Sim Racing yellow team, again, note yellow wing mirrors on that car, which is what will differentiate it from the other BMW Sim Racing cars. This is, in my opinion, going to be the battle of the race to the end now. And look at that, Salva Talens has gone green in 3 laps in a row. Also worth noting, Joshua Anderson will have some lap traffic to deal with as they'll come towards turn 7A, 7B. This is BMW Sim Racing. Let's see if we can zoom that camera out a little bit. See, there is traffic there. Actually, no, that's not traffic. I take that back completely. That is the Commander car. And you just noticed, actually, Adrian, that there is a little bit of damage to the front of this Vendavel car. We can just see there a little bit of crimping even, on the front left, if you were to be looking at it from on board of the driver. A little bit of crimping there to that car. That will hurt them in the biggest overtaking opportunity on track, the run down to 10A and 10B.
Absolutely, and I wonder if they may have got that damage from maybe hitting a curb too hard, because I don't really think they've been battling it out with too many cars over the last few laps. Just to point out, though, that Coanda car is actually lap traffic. That's Pash Gergis. The gap between Alander and Ostergaard is still around 5 seconds, so the battle for the race lead not really on right now. I think, though, these two drivers battling it out for the third and final podium spot are going to have to deal with that long snaking traffic queue that we got a brief look at just for a second. It's
also worth noting that if that's Pash Gergis there, then it was about 20 plus minutes ago that we saw Cobra coming past them. So it shows that even at the lap down traffic, the speed gaps are not that large, and that is the traffic that we were talking about. And just to let you know, at the front of that, having just got past all of it, that is Kova and Valtteri Alander. So they are now looking in a very strong position in this race, and this is what I mean. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cars that I can see there ahead of the Coanda Simsport number 8 car, and he is going to catch some of this traffic at a really, really bad place on track, and I wonder if he's actually going to catch some of this into turn 3. One car moves out the way, but some of this traffic, Tommy Erskard, looks as though it's not going to hold him up too much, but it will just disrupt the airflow a little bit into turn 3 and down the S's. I think he should just be lucky enough that it's not going to give him a massive time loss just yet.
He'll just be a little bit uncomfortable there. Interesting call from that lapped car to pull aside, Will, because that car is in its own battle with the VRS car of Pash Gergis behind. So very, very respectful driving there to let the second place driver through, let him try and battle for this race win. Let's see if he's going to be able to get these two other cars on this long run down to 10A, though.
Although we talked about not losing a lot of time, they've lost almost a second on this lap alone. As Tommy Erskard, we'll have a look at the lap times when they come past the start-finish. But Tommy Erskard, he will need to try and get past at least one of these. And again, cars moving out the way. That's one that's just gone past. And then he will probably catch the next driver. And quite often what will happen is if one driver will allow the faster traffic to go past, often in the kind of, gentleman racing that we see here, the other drivers will normally move out the way. But I think it's a little bit too far back is Tommy Erskard to really get any benefit. Get back down to 5.4 seconds. 4 attempts per second. That last lap, and a car off there down at turn number 3 as well. That makes a heart flutter a little bit more if you're that number 8 Coanda Sim Sports team. But 4 tenths per second slower that last lap was Coanda over Kova.
And that was Antoine Higelin, who was struggling off in the grass. He's been struggling over the last 10 or 15 minutes off onto the grass on a number of occasions of his own free will. But Will, if you take a look, we'll take a look at the replay very quickly. But that battle for third place, now just half a second separating Joshua Anderson and Salva Talens. That battle for that third position really heating up now.
Yeah, it is. And they've got the traffic to work through as well. So, in one hand, if you are Joshua Anderson, you are kind of happy for the moment because of the fact you get some tow down the straightaway. And that will help you for the next maybe lap or so until you get past it all. And then all of a sudden, this is going to come down maybe to the last 2 laps worth of racing after they clear this traffic. And Salva Talens will realistically have maybe 2 opportunities to really try and make this move happen. Because for the time being, Joshua Anderson is going to be able to utilize that draft to help him pick through traffic. And this is what makes a great driver in terms of endurance racing. How good are you when it comes to traffic management at a narrow track like Road Atlanta?
And he's going to get checked up here as they dive down through the S's. This is going to help Salva Talens, who had a little bit of a struggle getting the car turned into turn number 3. Anderson's just going to get held up through turn number 5, trying to get the power down. That car is going to stick to the inside line, I would assume, or just give the corner. But no, in fact, not making it easy at all. Anderson has to really fight that, and I think Talens is now going to lose out into turn 7. There's a little bit of contact with the lapped car. He pushes him deep, and he's now going to get stuck. Not a great exit out of this run, and Anderson's going to be able to build up the gap to about a second here.
Yeah, he will do. Salva Talens flashing those lights. He is second car in line that you can see on your shot, and Salva Talens is only just going to be able to get this move done into 10A, 10B. Yes, the traffic does allow him to go past. Gap remaining at about 7.5, 8 tenths of a second as they work through the exit of turns number 11 and 12 right now, past the start-finish line once again. So, although P number 1, P number 2 looks as though it's going to calm itself down, and unless Kova make a mistake, they are one hand towards some plane tickets, etc., to go to Munich for this battle for third place. $300 per driver, $600 for the team. It's far from over.
I mean, it's far from over, and if you're MSI, you can smell the blood. We talked about the damage that the Australian is having to deal with, and that's really going to hamper him as they finally get past those 2 cars in front. Give it a few laps. Still 8 minutes to go. They are going to clear those lap traffic in just a few laps' time. And then Salva Talens is really going to put the pressure on here. Is he going to get a good exit out of turn 7? It's not bad. Anderson also getting a very good run off the corner, though. It's not going to be close enough to try something here. But as we wind down towards these final laps, I think that Salva Talens is smelling blood.
And again, sidebar, just to remind you all that we all have to hope that they've got enough fuel to get to the end of the race, especially if they are unlucky that they have to do almost an entire full lap after the white flag comes out. So, have a look then on board of Salva Talens, exit turn 12. And again, Anderson is going to be helped for the next couple of laps because of the fact that the traffic will give him a tow down the straight. Traffic moves out the way for both drivers through turn number 1. The left-hand flick into turn 2, then the right down into turn number 3. Realistically, there's 2 more cars in this train that will be a factor for the last couple of laps of this race. And I know this is when John Heindorf will normally start saying what the computer's saying. I make it that we've got ourselves 5 laps of racing to go here, Arjuna.
Yeah, and as Valtteri Alander heads onto the back straight, I think you're nailing it with that lap count.
Oh my word! He's just looped it. He's just looped it. Joshua Anderson looped it there down in turn 7, and that's given it to the Salva Talens. Before you know it, and actually trying to spin that car around, all of a sudden, it's gone even worse for BMW Sim Racing Yellow because they almost made contact with RHG Esports. So this is down into turn 7.
And I think they actually lose it early. They just try and carry too much speed into turn 6, maybe get onto the grass on the left-hand side. Oh no, they lose it even earlier through the cambered turn number 6, just losing the rear end of the car. Too much steering lock for the speed being carried into the corner. And there you can see the rejoin. That lapped car really had to get on the anchors there to stop hitting the BMW Sim Racing yellow car.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, if that was one of our privately hosted leagues, as here's a look at that car, that's the over-rotation right there. And at this point, there's absolutely nothing you can do to avoid that car from looping it around. And Joshua Anderson then loops the car. And this is the bit that if this was a private hosted league, you'd get into a bit more trouble for. That's what we normally call a bit of an unsafe rejoin. So, and again, this is where the frustration kicks in. And for Joshua Anderson and BMW Sim Racing, yes, they might not have been going to Munich, but they would have been potentially winning some prize money. And you know what the only sad thing is, Arjuna? I would have loved to see these two drivers go wheel to wheel, side by side for the last couple of laps worth of racing.
I think that would have been a very interesting fight, but it's not over further up. I do believe Jordan Caruso is now having to fend off Ricardo Ferreira, who, as a result of that little incident, has been able to close up the gap a little bit further. So it's not a battle for 3rd and 4th anymore. It's now the battle for 4th and 5th. There are other battles brewing as well, because Alexander Thieb is now right behind Joshua Anderson. So Joshua Anderson, he's already felt the pressure once. What's going to happen now the last 5 minutes of the race? Yeah,
and of course, if you've got that extra heat in your tyres, it does take you a couple of laps for that to all calm down. There is AAA Esports Black, as I say, Astro Gaming Altus Esports, just ahead of them, 4 tenths on track. But if you are Jordan Caruso, you're happy that there's one car between you and the person behind, and that lap traffic is going to cost at least a second to Ricardo Ferreira there. Again, the lap traffic does not have to move out the way. Blue flag rules in iRacing dictate it is responsibility of the passing car to execute a clean and safe pass. So in that instance, it was perfectly fine for that lap down traffic to just basically run its line and do its job. But that's meant that Caruso now has a second of clean air, and Martin van Loozenord is on the tail of AAA Esports Black as they work towards 10A and 10B once again. So now it's a case Ricardo Ferreira is trying to put a car between the two of them, and he's not going to be as lucky, unfortunately. Martin van Loozenord was able to easily get past through into 10A and 10B. Well, so we've still got battles going on. And also, I do have to say very quickly as well, we still have a total of 45 drivers, actually 44 drivers circulating on track, because Antoine Higelam has brought that car on towards pit road, but we will end up with 45 classified finish, Arjuna. And out of a field of 51 on a track like this, all drivers have really got to be commended for that.
Yeah, they've done a very, very good job. Other than the start where there was a little bit of bumper banging, it was been fairly clean. We have seen some hot-headed moves down into the chicane, obviously, but also very impressive, Will. Your leader has been setting such a furious pace that he's managed to lap up to the 25th place car, and I would suspect he's going to lap a few more races as we... few more racers rather as we complete these last few laps.
Well, actually, you know what? If I was Kova at this stage and you've got a 6.5 second advantage, I'd start be getting onto the radio and saying, only overtake them down the back straight away, only overtake him if you really need to do so. And having a look then, as this is going to be Valtteri Alander exiting the final corner, because not only do you want to make sure you get past them cleanly, you've got to remember as well that the last thing you want into turn number 1 is for someone to have a hardware failure like what happened to Verstappen, and before you know it, you're into the wall. So for Valtteri Alander, now he's got 2 laps worth of racing to go, and it's a 6-second advantage over Tommy Erskard, and he's got mainly clean track ahead of him. He will catch maybe 1 more car, 2 more cars before the end of this race. I have got to ask you though, the question at this stage, who would be your driver of the day? Would you give it to Thomas Tassler, or would you give it to that fantastic first run that you had, for example, for Hesse Sicily? No, that wasn't Hesse Sicily, you know who I mean, in the MSI Esports car.
I know exactly what you mean, and I think honestly your answer has to go to Thomas Tatzler. He did what he needed to do. We talked about this being a fuel-saving race and drivers wanting to run in third. Well, the Finn decided, I'm going to set the pace from the start, build up that 8-second gap that he had at one point. And then his teammate jumped in. Valtteri Alander has managed this second half of the race beautifully, and he heads down the last corner for the penultimate time. He's going to take the white flag up in the air. This will be the last racing lap, and Kova this close to punching their ticket to Munich.
Indeed so. It is not that far between Finland and Munich, having to cross over a couple of countries to get there. They'd have to fly over Belgium, and then it will be a nice trip for these two drivers. And it has been a great race, I have to say. They outsmarted the entire field here today, early on, getting themselves that momentum and giving themselves the opportunity that meant that Coanda Sim Sports either had to race them hard for the entire race or had to let them keep that race lead. As we're on board right now with Valtteri Alander, it was Thomas Tattler who started this race here today. He's got one more car that he needs to get past. He's going to do this oh so carefully because Kova are about to give themselves their biggest ever trip in iRacing. Of course, they're a big sim racing, they're a big esports team outside of iRacing, but in terms of iRacing, this is going to be a statement victory. The team of Thomas Tattler and Valtteri Alander are going to claim victory in Edition 5 of the 2020 BMW Sim 120 Cup. Valtteri Alander is the driver who brings that car to the checkered flag, and there we just turn our attention back is the number 8 car of Tommy Erskard coming home second place. Third place, Salva Tallins. Fourth place we see is Jordan Caruso. Martin van Luzenhoor just come past there, rounds out your top 5. Well, what a victory there. What a statement win for Kova. And I think now they're going to have the opportunity to really demonstrate what that team is going to be on the big stage of Munich in December. And again, I can't believe that we're only a couple of months away from that one already. And BMW Sim Live 2020 taking place on the 5th of December 2020. We will be there. Of course, unfortunately, most fans won't be able to be there, but we will, of course, be streaming it all live on BMW and iRacing Esports Network's social media channels either. And for Kova, it's an interesting point that just came into my head here, Arjuna. A lot of the times when teams go to a big live event for the first time, they don't really know what to expect. Kova's got plenty of people that can call up for advice.
And it's not just the esports team that can give them that knowledge, Will. We talk about Valtteri Alander, Thomas Tattler. These are two very, very quick drivers who have competed in many, many big events. And delighted to see the Kova team doing what they needed to do here, just showing us exactly how strong they are. But I also did want to point out, we missed that pass that happened in the last few laps of the race. Martin van Luzenmoord was able to get past Ricardo Ferreira to get a top 5 finish. An interesting note, out of the top 5 finishers, only the top 2 started in the top 10. Very interesting race here today, and congratulations to the Finns for their win.
Indeed so. So Valtteri Alander, well, they still got fuel in the tank by the looks of it. That's an interesting one. Tommy Erskard and Coanda Sim Sports, of course, the number 8 team, they will have to wait until Interlagos to see whether they can punch the final ticket. I want to give a big shout out to MSI Esports. Of course, they won their first World Championship race a couple of months ago in the Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup. But the moment belongs. If they can get the car turned around, I remember when Trevor Bayne won the Daytona 500 and he didn't know how to do donuts. And I think we might be in a situation just like that right now with Kova.
He might also, well, there we go. He's finally got enough fuel to get that car. Maybe just turning the traction control off, and here come the celebratory donuts. And I'm not sure what time it is in Finland, but I have a feeling the party is just about to start.
The correct answer to that, I think they're 1 hour ahead of us, so it's 6 p.m. 6 p.m. on a Sunday. Don't worry, the shops are still open for another couple of hours. Finland's one of those countries where they do keep the shops open, even on a Sunday, compared to the UK, where all the shops are almost going to be closed in a moment. So let's have a look, shall we, at your final finishing race results. We put that graphic away, and we can hit these magical buttons, and before you know it, the results will come up. Statement victory. I'm going to say that a lot of times today. Statement victory for Kova there in the 707 car, winning by 7.1 seconds over Tommy Erskard and Koana Simsport. Koana Simsport, they looked as though they maybe got goaded at the start of the race to try and, of course, move into that position, second position early and try and run with Valtteri Alander and, of course, earlier on, Thomas Tattler's Kova team. But, of course, we can't talk about Koanda without also talking about the fact that they had some great battles with the Team Redline Orange car as well. And maybe the fact that they were fighting each other so hard early on gave Kova the opportunity they needed to really start pulling away in this race. MSI Esports, Salva Talent was the driver who brought that car home, but MSI Esports did a great job here today, coming home third place. And of course, the top three are those who get prize money positions. Fourth place, Astro Gaming Altus Esports, Jordan Caruso bringing the car home for number 83. RHE Esports coming home in fifth place. Martin van Loosenhoorn, the driver who drove the car to the checkered flag in the end. AAA Esports Black in P number 6. Team Redline Red was the highest placed Team Redline car. And you've got to feel a little bit bad for Vendaval Sim Racing Yellow coming home P number 8 after running in the podium position, coming down to the last 15 minutes. But they had a moment down at turn 7A. Well, that put them, unfortunately, down towards the bottom end of your top 10. Vendaval Sim Racing Pink in 9th place and Team Redline Blue rounding out your top 10. It is worth noting only two sim racing teams had two sets of driver teams coming home inside the top 10. They were Team Redline and Vendaval Sim Racing here today. Highest place Williams Esports car was Arthur LeHoke, bringing that on home. The number 3 car, Team Redline Orange. This was the car that was battling so hard early on with Dane Warren when Max Verstappen was behind the wheel of the car. But then Verstappen had himself some technical gremlins, and before you knew it, they ended up in the wall, and they had to basically lose out at the shot of a top 10, even maybe fighting for the win after that. Bruno Sud competition car, number 7. They had some incidents along the way, but they come home P number 13. The Urano Esports Hawari car in 14th, and Alien Zarotti rounds out your top 15 drivers. Williams Esports BenQ, AAA Esports White, Brennan Sim Sports, Koana Sim Sports, and Williams Esports Chill Blast. They are your top 20 teams. The rest of them are going to come up on your screen right now. In the meanwhile, we are going to talk to the two drivers from Kova who have just punched their ticket to Munich in December. We've got Valtteri Alander who crossed the line in first place, but I'm going to start with the driver who did the first hour's worth of driving, Thomas Tattler. Congratulations on, of course, what was an absolute dominant victory, and that all really started in qualifying, getting pole position. Talk us through it.
Yep, really nailed my lap. The second lap was just completely overdriving. A bit surprised I could get pole, but yeah, happy. And then that gave me the option to just try to get a gap right at the start, and others helped. I could get enough of a gap where they couldn't draft behind me, and yeah.
We talked quite heavily about the need to fuel save quite a lot in this race. How hard were you fuel saving? How difficult is it when you're running out front to keep that motivation when fuel saving? And how actually do you think it was important that the drivers behind you really started fighting it out to give you the opportunity to build that gap out more?
Yeah, I was driving to the number the whole race. We were practicing saving fuel earlier, so it was not that difficult. Yeah, I knew that if they are just drafting behind each other, they could save a couple of laps of fuel and then push hard on the second hour. But luckily, it never came to that.
We've got Valtteri Alander here as well. Valtteri, in terms of your hours worth of driving, it seemed to be traffic management became more and more important the deeper you went into your run.
Yeah, really. There were a few really tough back markers, and it wasn't easy trying to get past them, and also I have to manage the fuel at the same time because that was really important during the whole race. So it was quite tough second hour, but I have to say big thanks to Tuomas because his first hour and his qualifying was just unbelievable.
And of course, it is worth noting at this stage that you have now punched your ticket to Munich. So a flight from Finland, and then a hotel, and then a day's worth of sim racing awaits. How excited are you, Valtteri?
Really excited. Never imagined that I would get there with the teammates. So it's going to be a really nice experience.
And of course, we can't let you finish off this interview without the opportunity to say thank you to your sponsors, partners, etc. So the floor is yours, whoever wants to take it away.
Oh, well, first of all, really big thanks to Tuomas, our team, the whole organization. Like after we launched the team, it has been really great success so far. And thanks to our sponsors, and yeah, just unbelievable feeling.
Anything to add there, Thomas?
Nope. Thank you to everyone.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. I just realised we haven't shown you the last couple of results up on our screen. They're so engaged in the conversation. But Thomas Tattler, Valtteri Lander there for Kova claiming victory, and really good to hear their thoughts after that race. And again, we didn't really talk about it that much, Arjuna, but that did all really come down from that fantastic qualifying lap to really set things in motion. And at Road Atlanta, in a long race, I mean, this wasn't a long race, it was a medium length race, but in a long race, qualifying doesn't really matter that much. But in a medium race like this, it can be really important. And I think what we saw today was the fact that Kova, because of the fact that they were able to get that early advantage, it really allowed them to dictate the pace of the race and really get themselves into a rhythm so that they were well set for hour 2 when they needed to be more on their toes.
Yeah, it was almost the perfect weekend for them as well. You know, other than the few laps that first Alejandro Sanchez and then Jamie Fluke led because of the pit strategy, they really didn't have much of a challenge. Yes, Dane Warren tried to press them a little bit harder in the end of his first stint, but for the Kova team, they did the perfect job. And the only thing I maybe wonder, Will, is if Verstappen and Warren hadn't had their issues going down into turn number 2, into the chicane on lap number 2, I wonder if the Coanda team might have been able to do a little bit better at pressing that Kova team and made the job a little bit harder. We're going to take a look, though, at the start now and just see all the chaos that did unfold.
Yeah, well, we will do in a few seconds' time once I pull out where I want to go. Yeah, indeed, we do apologise that we didn't want to be in a situation, shall we say, where we put the hardware at risk at the start of this one. So we're going to show you the start of the race, and we wanted to show you the Rahal Lesman Lanigan racing car in particular, because they were one of the cars involved in an incident. But if we just get ourselves a look up here, and you can see all the cars storming down in towards one for the first time, going 3 wide as they entered the corner, and then that's where you can see the Rahal Lesman Lanigan racing car going off at the start of the race. But it's a bit of a shame for them because, again, we're getting more and more really top names into the series here, Arjuna. So it's a shame that they weren't able, in what is essentially their second race in terms of that partnership with Apex, deliver the same level of result as, of course, they famously did first time out.
Yeah, and we also were just going to take a look there at something that happened out front, because Max Verstappen getting in a little bit of contact with both the Coanda and Williams cars forced the Williams cars off into the grass. That lost them all that position. And I think, like you say, talking to Zach Campbell in the lead up to this race, he was very excited about this Rahal Lederman-Lanigan partnership and continuing on from that victory at the Indy 500. So unfortunately, not what the result they would have wanted, but hopefully we'll get to see that combination in a future event, maybe at Petit Le Mans in just a few weeks' time.
Yeah, and that was the contact that you were talking about there. They were not the winners. Let's take that graphic away. It was almost perfect with the graphics, but that was it wasn't Patrick Moser either, of course. That was Max Verstappen at the start of that race, but you saw that contact that they had down in turn number 1. So a bit of a bargy-bargy, but, you know, we talk about all of that. I actually would like to say in place, we're just going to put the season schedule up and remind you that we've got one more race of this championship to go, and that will be at Interlagos. I will say, Arjuna, that the racing overall was the level of top, the top level of kind of like not only racing ability, but sportsmanship for the most part as well. We didn't have that many incidents, and if I was doing race control today, I would have left my race control booth a very happy man.
I think there are going to be a few protests submitted to the iRacing steward, so Nim Cross is going to have a busy Monday morning when he gets back into the office, I would assume. But I think you're right. What we saw last time out at Spa was a little bit more hectic. You know, it's a little bit more of a passing opportunities around that track, a lot more drafting. And I'm thinking that in just a few weeks' time, 6 weeks' time, back in Brazil, in Interlagos, expecting more of a chaotic race than what we saw here today. Although, I'm going to call it right now, fuel saving, we've seen it in these previous 5 races being so important. Interlagos, the same thing is going to happen.
Interlagos, it will all come down to humidity, in my opinion. And the humidity will really impact on the level of fuel saving that needs to be completed. Again, I'm not going to give us a science lesson here today because I only know how to teach a certain number of things. But Interlagos is going to be so much fun. I actually can't remember the last time I commentated on a G-based race at Interlagos, but I know just how incredible it's going to be to see all those cars come down through Center S. And again, that first lap, we can easily be looking at drivers going too wide the entire way around. Trust is going to be so important at that race, and of course there's going to be so much on the line because we now have 5 teams who have punched their ticket to Munich. And as you just see there on the season schedule, not only have they got that entry into the end of year sim event in Munich, but they've also won $1,200 each. So even better if you're Thomas Tattler or Valtteri Landa. For second place here today, you were able to get Tommy Erskine and Dane Warren, $600 per each of those drivers. And for finishing in third place, and again, MSI Esports, absolutely great for them here today. Alejandro Sanchez and Salva Talent, they get themselves $300 as well. So great job to them. And of course, Kova joined Team Redline, Koana Sim Sport, BS Competition, and the Williams Esports Cup of Nations cars in Munich on December the 5th. Don't forget, we have got coverage of the next and final round of the 2020 BMW Sim 120 Cup. Also, coverage of the BMW Sim Live event in Munich as well in December. I'm looking forward to both of those, Arjuna. It's great to actually be able to go back out onto site and get to work with my great RaceBot Live events team. I think it's going to be absolutely fun, even though we're having to make some changes, of course, to deal with social distancing, etc. And we're not going to have the same number of fans as we did last year. Really looking forward to get back out to BMW Welt in Munich and really put on a good show, which I think is going to be a great Christmas present for everyone involved in sim racing. Who's had to watch so many things cancelled this year, have something going on that we can all look at and enjoy. It will be so much fun.
Yeah, I'm only a little bit jealous, Will, that because of everything going on, I'm going to be unable to make that trip out there, but I will be watching closely as I did last year. I'm expecting a very, very interesting finale. Everybody there on site, it's slightly different. You're not in your usual environment where you may be very comfortable. It's all about who's going to adapt best and perform in that live environment.
And with that, we are going to say thank you so much to everyone who's been a part of our broadcast here on RaceBot TV today. As I'm going to say, hit that music. So, as ever, I want to say a big thank you to Arjuna Kantapati for being my co-commentator here from this great race that we've had at Road Atlanta. I want to give a shout out, as ever, to Islam Balao, TrackCams22.com, our partners at Timing71 for their great live timing and scoring software that we've been able to use for this event, as well as our partners over at VCO, and finally, Hugo Ruiz for continuing to make me good on a daily basis. So that is it. That is event number 5 in the BMW Sim 120 Cup, done, dusted, in the books. And well, it's going to be Finland joining the party in Munich in December, and I am so looking forward to see what Thomas Tattala and Valtteri Alander can do. They join Max Benecke, Max Venig, Josh Rogers, Mitchell de Jong, Lauren Heinrich, Alexander Voss, Sami Matti-Trogan and Augustin Canapino on December 5th at BMW Welt. Who's going to join them? We've got one more opportunity, and we'll find out in a few weeks' time as we head over to Interlagos. Thank you again for being a part of our broadcast today across social media. My name's Will Vincent. We'll talk to you all next time. Goodbye from Road Atlanta.